Good morning and welcome to the final day, the final session of MediWales Connects, the NHS Collaboration Conference. It's an absolute delight to be welcoming our expert panel of speakers today and our delegates, some of whom I know have been with us for this whole week of seminars, conferences, presentations, workshops, and meetings, and some of you who've joined especially for today. So welcome to you as well. We didn't stop getting registrations until very late last night. So I know that we've got a good attendance for today, and I know that some of you are particularly interested in today's theme, which is our highlighting on digital. Now, it would have when Debbie and Helen were discussing the conference content early on in the planning stage. The conversation was about whether or not we could devote a whole day, a whole morning to a digital theme. And it turns out that has been exactly the right thing to do, not only because of the quality of the speakers that we have today and the presentations we have, but also if you have been attending the conference for the last week, you'll know that digital transformation and digital technology has been a thread running through the whole conference, and we've seen new digital solutions, we've seen platforms, we've seen adoption. Remote monitoring, patient empowerment, use of data to inform clinical teams, but also to inform patients and carers. And some of this has happened despite COVID. Some of it has happened because teams have had the opportunity to work on new innovative projects, and some of it has happened because of COVID, where new solutions have been required at pace and at scale in order to address the immediate concerns and immediate issues that the NHS has been facing. One thing that runs through all of those activities has definitely been a feeling that individuals, innovators, and teams within the NHS and in industry teams who are working with the NHS have felt more empowered to develop new solutions, to adopt new solutions, and to benefit and to help in this transformation of the NHS through the use of digital services. So that sounds like an absolutely perfect reason, and what better one could there be to devote the final session to digital solutions in the round. Really glad that Helen Northmoor, who I think is coming on screen, which I'm always relieved at, first session of the day. It's always nice to see my first speaker arrive. Welcome, Helen. It's great to be working with the Digital Health Ecosystem Wales in this venture in this morning, but also in the work leading up to this morning, the collaborative conversations that we've been having, and obviously moving forward from today, there's going to be projects, opportunities, partnerships that will develop out of today. So I have the luxury of being able to hand over to Helen today because she's going to chair. Now my team are laughing a little about this because they know I'm a bit of a control freak and I like to keep hold of the reins, but I have every confidence that Helen and our speakers today are going to deliver a superb event, and so I really am looking forward to it. So just two housekeeping things before I hand over to Helen. One is, please use the chat. And the Q&A. It doesn't really matter which you use. We will be monitoring both. We have teams on looking at both, and it really does help. It helps the speakers to realise that they're not just talking in an empty room, in their back bedroom, in their home office, in their kitchen, that they are actually talking to an audience if you engage. And use it to introduce yourselves. It doesn't have to be a question to the panel. It would be great if it was a question to the panel. I'd really like them to be pressed to answer difficult questions throughout the morning. But use it to introduce yourself. Put a web link in the chat. This is a collaboration conference. It's in the title. So if you want to introduce yourself, your organisation, then please feel free to do that. It can be difficult when we're running events online. It's taken a year for everybody to adapt to this new method of delivering events. We're all fairly good at it now, but we do know the limitations, and they are the ability to network in the round in order for everybody to participate. So please use the chat, please use the Q&A, and please use our Twitter handle and our Twitter tag. It doesn't really matter which one you use. You can use @MW Connects, or you can use #MW Connects, and we'll all be able to share in that messaging. And I'm sure Helen's going to remind me of the DHEW handle as soon as she comes on air. So on that note, absolutely delighted to welcome Helen and the rest of the speaker panel, and I'm going to hand over to you, Helen, for the rest of the morning.
Well, thank you, Gwyn. It's always a delight to work with you and Izzy and Debbie and the team. I'm absolutely delighted that we're collaborating this morning. Gwyn summed up exactly why digital health is always a topic at conferences, and how important it is to all sort of areas of activity that we're looking. It's really an underpinning sort of area within health, and offers such huge opportunities. One of the reasons the ecosystem exists is to try and make it easier, and faster to adopt digital healthcare technologies. If you haven't come across the Digital Health Ecosystem Wales, please check out our website, digitalhealth.wales, or our Twitter, as Gwyn pointed out, is @DHE to see what we do and how we can help you. So Gwyn's talked about some of the examples and case studies and projects that are happening that have already come up during the conference, but today's agenda is focusing on how we can make the most of the opportunities new technologies provide to provide better care for more people in a more effective way. So we have 3 sessions today. At 10:45, we'll be hearing from 4 companies about how they've been able to support the NHS in the past 12 months with rapid rollout of new technology to continue delivering healthcare services during the pandemic. And at 12:15, it's your chance to learn about the National Data Resource, the flagship programme which will deliver a more joined-up approach to health and care data across Wales. But first, we have our keynote speaker for today. I'm delighted to welcome Ifan Evans, who's the Director of Technology, Digital and Transformation for the Welsh Government's Health and Social Services Department. Ifan has a wide and varied portfolio, including digital policy, digital elements of the COVID pandemic response, strategy and transformation, technology and innovation, NHS engagement, partnering with industry and university, including supporting the digital health ecosystem, EU transition and intergovernment, for example, changes to innovation procurement legislation, foundational economy and supply chain development, and how NHS activity supports local economies. With everything that's happened in the past year from COVID to Brexit, there is no one better placed to give us a view on what's happened, what we've learned, and what the future looks like for the digital transformation of healthcare in Wales. Ifan, over to you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Helen. So while that's an introduction, I think I've got somebody doing some slides that will come up on screen in a second. Bore da bawb, yn hyfryd gweld chi fan hyn, a na ni. Right, mae'r slides ar y screen. So assuming everybody can hear me, because I don't get any feedback and I'm not sure how many people are listening, I'm going to talk for, I think, around 30 minutes or so. So get yourself a coffee if you need one. Today is a really important day. There is a new 12th NHS Wales organisation which starts working today on digital. That's not an April Fool's joke. Maybe a few years ago, it would have been considered so, but I think it's a symbol, or it's a sign of the way that the digital community across the whole of Wales has matured over the last few years and the progress that we've made. I feel very much today as if I'm speaking on behalf of the NHS rather than government. It really has been a collaborative effort over the last 12 and a bit months in response to the COVID pandemic between the NHS, local authorities, Welsh Government, but also industry supplier partners. None of us would have been able to achieve any of what has been achieved on our own. And I'm really keen to emphasize that, given the theme of the conference on collaboration. So if we can move to the next slide, I'll just set out roughly where what I'm trying to cover. And this is, I guess, a consolidation, or I'm trying to review what's happened over the last few years, the last 2 years particularly, in digital health and care in Wales. And maybe a bit of commentary at the end about what the future opportunities are. But this is mostly a sort of a where are we now sort of discussion. And this slide just shows a bit of the timeline for the last decade or so. The origin of NHS Wales Informatics Services, usually known as NWIS, which is the National Digital Service function, I suppose, at the moment, well, it was until last night, function for NHS Wales, which was a consolidation of 3 different digitally oriented or informatics oriented programs across NHS Wales in 2010. 10 years is a long time ago in digital, and obviously the use of digital, the use of data has moved on an enormous amount. Some of that was sort of noted and described in Informed Health and Care, which is a Welsh Government-led strategy for the NHS particularly, published in 2016. And then it was also re-emphasised in A Healthier Wales, which is the current health and social care strategy for Wales, published in 2018, just been refreshed in the last week or so, actually, to take account of some of the lessons learned from COVID. And I'll mention some of those over the next couple of slides, for digital particularly. But the important thing is that Healthier Wales was identifying digital and technology as a major enabler of change, alongside workforce and some other themes. But it did give priority to digital, including some key programs like the National Data Resource, the Welsh Community Care Information System. There was increased investment attached to that, and a new sort of policy direction announced in late 2019, including establishment of a Chief Digital Officer, transition of NWIS to a new Digital Special Health Authority, as well as a program of strategic investment. And again, I'll cover some of those in the coming slides. And then about a year ago, or just over a year ago, the COVID pandemic response arrived. That changed everything. It wasn't predicted, wasn't planned for. Overall, I think that it's been for digital, the digital response to COVID pandemic has been a positive one, but particularly in what the digital community in Wales has learned about itself and about the confidence it can take from the way that it's responded to the COVID pandemic. This isn't unique to Wales. You know, digital has been part of COVID pandemic response globally, across the world, lots and lots of learning and a real acceleration of how digital and technologies, including things like vaccine and a whole range of other things, the research to application loop, how that has been accelerated. And then today, 1st of April 2021, Digital Health and Care Wales starts. There's a board meeting this afternoon, which is an open board meeting, as all board meetings are in Wales. So if you go to their website, you can find the link and then you can observe their board meeting. Although I don't think today's is going to be enormously exciting, because what they're doing is confirming their governance arrangements, policies, financial instructions, and a whole range of other things. But you will be able to see the board members, all of these things announced over the last few months in the run-up to the establishment. If we can move to the next slide. So the pandemic response, COVID hit us from out of the blue. There was a really very intense, very, very fast crisis mode response, gold, silver and bronze decision-making arrangements, a sort of a consolidation through a digital cell arrangement of all of the digital leadership across Wales. And that means all the health boards and trusts, NWIS, Welsh Government, as well as key local authority representation. And it led to a whole range of different initiatives, most of which were delivered very, very quickly, with a very high degree of national consensus and all Wales approach to that. Infrastructure response, because of the video that we needed to use, a very significant step up in the bandwidth capability of our national data centres, a very rapid deployment of mobile devices for NHS staff, particularly so that they could continue to work from home, big upgrades to VPN servers to provide secure access. You know, these are the nuts and bolts, the plumbing of the system, but you need them if you're going to do a lot more on digital. An all Wales video consultation service rolled out. We had a demonstrator in the Aneurin and Bevan region using a product called Attend Anywhere. Within about 6 weeks, that was stepped up to an all Wales instance, cloud deployed across the whole of primary care, and since then has been extended to outpatients, to allied health professions, to a pharmacy as well, I think. So currently running at around 5,000 consultations a week. In the midsummer, more than half of our consultations were being conducted over video, which just goes to show how important video was in maintaining services as much as possible. A big investment in mobile and remote working for NHS staff. Microsoft Teams rolled out as part of an existing Office 365 project. When initially conceived, Teams was the last thing that was going to be switched on. As it turned out, Teams was the first thing that was switched on. And the use of Teams across the NHS and Welsh Government, and I'm sure many other organisations, has helped make all other projects and programmes happen. You know, I've got people working in my directorate who I've never met, who live face to face, that is, and yet have made an enormously valuable contribution. And this sort of remote working, Zoom, which we're using today, has really changed a lot. And it was very impressive. Again, by the beginning of May 2020, Microsoft Teams have been deployed to over 100,000 staff across the whole of NHS Wales. Very, very quick. A digital contact tracing platform delivered very rapidly. In May and June of last year, recommendations on contact tracing that was commissioned and procured, deployed, tested, staff onboarded in over 30 different organisations, all within 40 days. It's a truly remarkable delivery led by NWIS, but with Public Health Wales and with local authority teams across the whole of Wales being a really important part of that. The key thing, though, I think it's an all Wales platform with multiple users. So it's one platform and many different organisations using it. And that's something which sometimes health systems have really struggled to deliver, but that was delivered very rapidly. And the digital vaccine platform is similar. So we've got an all Wales digital vaccine platform, which some of you on the call, no doubt, will have been involved with developing, or maybe receiving your jabs, seeing it on screen as the health staff and volunteers are entering your detail onto the Welsh immunisation system. Behind all of this, there's a huge amount of integration, testing, big feature of COVID. So a lot of integration, particularly through the Welsh Laboratory Informatics Service, WLIMS. Unlike England, we've got a single consolidated laboratory information system that's enabled us to have a really good visibility on the traffic of COVID tests, ensuring that those are reported to primary care as well as into our contact tracing service. And used for text reminders and all sorts of other results notifications, and has given us a clear route for integrating with England, because there are UK arrangements for testing as well. There is still significant investment ongoing, continually functionality is being developed in all of these things, and I'm sure that digital transformation is going to be a very big part of COVID recovery and reconstruction of the system. And again, a document published in the last few weeks setting out some of the headlines for that. So if we move to the next slide, some of our initial sort of reflections. I know yesterday you had a paper on innovation. So Tom James and Sean Charles were presenting on the innovation review that has been undertaken. A lot of lessons there about the speed of transformation and innovation. And here are some lessons initial lessons, I should say. The last point that we have to keep on learning on this. We are learning stuff all the time as we do things. But some of our initial lessons learned on digital, the infrastructure is important. Everything relies on a secure, solid infrastructure that's able to capture and handle the volumes that we've got. 50,000 vaccinations, a day, that sort of level across Wales. Huge numbers of tests at the peak of, during the first and second peaks of COVID, particularly the second peak when we were testing at scale. Hundreds of thousands of tests coming in to the system at a scale that we've not seen before. Infrastructure is important. Information governance, the sharing of information. There's a little known for the public anyway, regulation called the Control of Patient Information, COPI. COPI has built, it's a set of regulations which have built into it flexibility in the original legislation to use in areas in times of crisis. And so we've, if you like, turned on that function, and that's given us more freedom than we would usually have to share across health and social care boundaries, for example. That has been very useful. We've learned a great deal from that, and I think it's helped to improve services. But it is still a temporary crisis response arrangement, which at some point will unravel. But that pragmatism has enabled things to move very quickly. Building out from existing programs has been really very helpful. Things like the video consultation or the Office 365 and Teams rollout program. Those programs were already there. They had a program team recruited, and it was therefore possible to accelerate them very, very quickly rather than have to build them from scratch. Doesn't mean to say that that's the only way to do it. There was not a program for contact tracing, for example, but it does help if you've got something which is already there that you can build or expand or scale out from. Standard products deployed nationally from the cloud. There has not been a great deal of localized configuration for things like contact tracing or for the immunization system. They look the same everywhere across the whole of Wales. They work the same. They use the same data standards. They use the same reports. They use the same screens. That has really helped training, onboarding, but also the functionality and the upgrade, because there is only one development pathway, if you like, not many. It helps that contact tracing and immunization are relatively, compared to some of our other systems in healthcare, quite simple, one-dimensional systems. But still, the cloud deployment has enabled us to do things very quickly and to do things on an all-Wales basis. And that's linked to the way that training has been done. There were 2,500 people onboarded to the contact tracing system within about a fortnight, 2 to 3 weeks. And that was done through large-scale webinars, 150 people at a time, with experts right at the front line. So the people who had written the scripts for the contact tracing were on that call. That meant that questions could be answered immediately. Things that were unclear could be very quickly folded back into the development pathway to change and to adjust screens. That's not the way that we usually do things. We would often, develop a product, and then there would be floor walkers, there'd be service desks, and there would be a far longer period. But the webinar approach, I think, is very promising. The webinars were recorded. People could go back to review them afterwards, and it was definitely a key part of training so many people so quickly. And then working with partners, including industry and universities, is particularly true in other sectors, vaccine task force, the vaccine pathway, and other things. But in digital as well, there's been close working with our key delivery partners. All the systems that we deliver have got someone, some business partners in the background somewhere, whether that's the cloud hosting service or whether that's the software platform supplier. And we've worked closely with universities as well on many of these things. And again, these things are all flagged in A Healthier Wales. There's a whole section in there about working more closely, the NHS working more closely with industry and with the universities. Next slide, please. So where are we on our digital investment? Particularly, is structured thematically. So this is a portfolio of investment supporting national or all Wales strategic investment programs under these 5 main headings. One is about transforming digital services for patients and the public. These are, if you like, these are user-facing services, apps that users would have for appointment booking and other things. So there's a whole bundle of work there, and video consultation, the technology-enabled care program is part of that. The next theme is, or if you like, bundle of programs is about transforming digital services for professionals. So these are most of the users for most of the healthcare service are clinicians, nurses, doctors. There's some administrative management in there, but most of it is about the clinical use of data and digital. So these are big programs. They're big, like LIMS and the replacement for LIMS, the Canis cancer system, the patient administration systems, the Welsh Clinical Portal, WCP Mobile. So the whole range of different services. Some of them more specialized, so like digital ICU, which is a program in intensive care units. Obviously, intensive care units have been right at the front line of COVID response, and that's about again consolidating to a common national platform and suite of tools for digital intensive care. Data underpins all of this. Really important. The National Data Resource Program, a major strategic program to create a data warehouse, but also a much more open data platform, more APIs. And intelligent information is about using data to derive actionable information that you can use in clinical care and in the planning of services overall. Modernizing devices, moving to cloud is about our data centers and about our network, about our Wi-Fi connectivity, about servers, systems, the mobile devices that we use. This is all hardware, but more than hardware, it's also about some of the software platforms that we're using nationally. Cybersecurity and resilience, ever more important. COVID has been an opportunity for hackers and malicious actors. There have been 2 global cyber issues already in 2021, SolarWinds and an Exchange server hack. These are not cyber secrets or anything. This has been widely reported in the public. It just goes to show, though, that if as digital becomes more important to the delivery of services everywhere, not just in health, then cyber becomes more of an issue that needs to be addressed. And then the final theme, which is not really a theme, I suppose, is cross-cutting investment. This is about things that benefit all of those. It's about things like the Chief Digital Officer and the supporting functions there. It's about small-scale agile digital innovation. It's about developing workforce capability and capacity, particularly because if you're dialing up the use of digital, the investment in digital, then you need to dial up the workforce capability and capacity behind that. Then if we go to the blockbuster theme, I'll have a P, please, Bob, on the next slide. Here we are. I'll have a P, please, Bob. This is just a bit of the acronym soup that we have. Gold prize to anybody who knows what all of these acronyms mean. I think I just wanted to set out how much there is. This is just a small part, actually, of the variety of programs that are used across health and care. As you can imagine, healthcare is a gigantic service, especially if you include care in that. There are almost 250,000 people across health and care in the workforce, and that's the paid workforce. There's even more in the unpaid. If you count unpaid carers. So there are obviously going to be many different services. It's a big and very complex interconnected world. Part of the strategy that has been set out is, this isn't particularly different or novel to what's being said generally in terms of digital, is to move towards much more open architecture, interoperability, standardized approaches, common standards, international where possible, or UK, and where there are no standards, we need to develop our own here in Wales. Clinical engagement, user-focused design, really important all the way through. That requires a faster, more digital, incremental update sort of release cycle rather than monolithic updates in the old style. It also helps to have modularized software development to separate data from view. Or the application layer from service layers and various other things. And there are some things that you really do need to be all Wales without a doubt, and that is data. You need one authoritative data source. I think Wales is in a relatively good position in terms of integrated national data for health, things like picture archiving, like the laboratory system. They do have an all Wales coverage, and we've seen some of the benefits of those things come through in COVID. If we can go to the next slide, please. So as I said at the beginning, there is a new special health authority today, Digital Health and Care Wales. Initially, it's described as a transition of NWIS. Clearly, there will be changes, but some of the important thing I think is, and for me anyway, the thing which I welcome most is the recognition and the status of digital alongside other things. So a Healthier Wales sets out how digital, as I said earlier, is alongside workforce and a few other themes are key enablers. Health Education Improvement Wales is a special health authority established a couple of years ago, focused on workforce development across the whole of NHS, working very closely with Social Care Wales. Having a new special health authority for digital puts digital up there alongside workforce and skills development. And you need skills and tools to make a difference. Neither works on its own without the others. And the interaction between the use of digital data and connected technologies with the skill sets that we need in the workforce, I think, is a really powerful one, and follows through from a Healthy Wales. And a Healthy Wales itself reflects a parliamentary review on health and care, which was an all-party consensus, an all-party group, setting out what the future needs for health and social care were. So I think there's a really strong agreement on what it is we need to do, and this is part of building that new configuration, I suppose, at national level for the NHS. I think it will also be really good to have an independent board assurance, support and challenge for NWIS, or the new NWIS as we move into Digital Health and Care Wales. I'm really excited about the board that has been appointed, and particularly about the sector experience and background of the people who have been appointed as independent members onto that board. Again, you can see that online and see who they are, but they're not all from a conventional or traditional health background. People there from consumer telecoms, from financial regulation, and a variety, and engineering, sort of FTSE listed international companies engineering. So there are quite a few new insights and new perspectives, and I think that is going to be really useful, and we can draw on that to bring in expertise and perspectives into the health system to everyone's benefit. If we move to the next slide, please. So I've talked a lot about a healthier Wales, and one of the things that Healthier Wales tried to tackle was this balance between local and national. So Wales has a planned system of healthcare, and therefore, in theory, it can be a directed system. You can direct from the top down, but health doesn't work like that. The innovation happens at the front line, and it's important that we can link those two things together. And this diagram is taken from a Healthier Wales, trying to show how we've got this concept, and this applies to innovation as well. And you might have seen that in the session yesterday, about how we take things from local prototypes to regional production, and then we scale them to all Wales adoption, if you like. So there is a balance there between the local and the national, because a national direction on what we're seeking to scale to all Wales adoption is helpful. But the innovation, the fresh thinking, the testing, the demonstration of things, the alpha phases, those things happen locally. So that is what the open architecture and interoperability and modularization of software and other things and common standards is supposed to encourage. And I think we have seen some examples of that. So video consultation was in demonstrator phase in an area in Bevan in February and March of last year. And because it was in the demonstrator phase in the Aneurin Bevan region, that made it easier to scale it very quickly to all Wales. And then a very small example, but an important one, is contact tracing reports. So the contact tracing platform runs on Microsoft Dynamics CRM, Microsoft Power BI, which is also often part of the Microsoft licensing for large organizations as part of Teams. So Power BI is part of the Power Apps platform and suite on Microsoft. So Power BI works very closely with the contact tracing platform. And then when certain organizations in North Wales, in the Betsi Cadwaladr region, developed their own reports for contact tracing so they could get a better insight into clusters and outbreaks and the volume of traffic that was going through that, those Power BI reports could just be shared across the whole of Wales immediately. People in Swansea didn't need to develop their own, didn't need a different report for Howell, for Swansea, for Cardiff, for Aneurin Bevan. Because it was a common platform, the Power BI report that had been done in North Wales could just be instantly switched on for everybody across the whole of Wales. There are real advantages in that in terms of speed and pace, as well as avoiding duplication and therefore driving efficiency and better value for the taxpayer. Next line, please. So my last couple of slides are trying to expand out a little bit from digital and data specifically, and to say that I don't think that you can disentangle digital from technology. I think that they're more or less one and the same at the moment. So things that are called medical technologies or are very often, almost always these days, becoming digital things. So whether that is genomics, we've done an awful lot of genomics in terms of COVID pandemic. The virus was sequenced within a week or so in China. Within another 2 or 3 weeks, there were labs that were already developing RNA-based vaccine candidates. Digital software was behind all of that. Digital drives the tools that analyzes the DNA, but also the tools that create the RNA using various other technologies. But these things are done on computer screens. Artificial intelligence used increasingly, lots of hype around artificial intelligence, but that's digital. New technologies are creating more and more and more data, Internet of Things, sensors, wearables, patient-provided outcomes, patient-reported experience, lots and lots of data being created through digital channels. And then new technologies are consuming data as well. So you're monitoring your analytics, your insights, your predictive systems and all the rest of it. They're using data, and artificial intelligence as well is using data to learn how to do things more accurately and better, whether that is image analysis or it's pattern analysis or supported diagnostics or prognostics or anything else. So digital and data is absolutely at the core of all of these things. And as if that isn't exciting enough, I think COVID has also really accelerated the technology cycle and has shown how much more rapidly things could be done when there is a crisis and an urgency. The speed with which vaccines have been developed, trialed and deployed is astounding. But the speed at which telemedicine, video consultation and these kinds of things have been rolled out also from 2 years ago would have been considered unbelievable. People will say that 5 years of progress has been made in 5 months. And investment into healthcare globally has absolutely boomed. You can look at technology shares, particularly in the United States. And in the last 12 months, they've gone up 800%. sometimes, over 1,000 times in a year, 1,000%, not 1,000 times. So they've been sort of 10 baggers in share investment. But this is for a whole suite of genomics companies. And it's also for anybody who's involved, any company involved in the RNA vaccine space. There's an enormous wall of money which is pouring into that. And I think governments are doing the same thing and putting out. This is all governments. This is not Welsh government specifically. This is all governments setting out their intent to seriously invest in applied health and social care, health and life sciences investment technologies, digital and data. So there's a lot of money coming, and you need a lot of people to turn money into outcomes. Not as many for digital maybe as for some traditional technologies, but you still need a lot of people. You need a workforce with the skills, the capacity, the capability, the expertise to turn all that money into research and product development, into actual usable products and services. Next slide, please. And I think this is the last slide. So again, on the theme of expanding out from the particular health and social care trajectory we've had over the last few years, there's a new digital strategy for Wales. So this is a Welsh Government strategy setting out an agenda for the entire public sector, but not just the public sector. The second bit of this slide is about how we're all in the same boat and we've all got a common interest from whatever sector we come. So as I just said, funding and investment needs talent. As we see more attention, more investment, more demand, I guess, for digital, for data, for technology, we need the skills, we need the workforce in what is a very fast-moving, rapidly evolving sector. Skills need to be refreshed and updated every 5 years because the whole landscape changes. We need partners. You can't do this in its entirety in-house. Nobody can do it in its entirety in-house. If you're a business, you need to work closely with your customers, whether those are individual users or they're corporate partners like the NHS. And if you're the NHS, you need to work with external partners, universities, industry, your key suppliers and others. And that's because we've all got common needs, and actually we've got shared benefits. So investment in digital infrastructure. I think the hard infrastructure of connectivity, bandwidth, capability, Wi-Fi coverage, that benefits everyone. It benefits the public, it benefits patients, it benefits the professionals that use the system, but it benefits the companies that partner with the NHS as well, because it gives you a much larger addressable market as more people are connected. That goes very closely with digital inclusion. All governments very concerned with digital inclusion, digital exclusion specifically, and about the level to which communities and individuals are able to access digital services that are available, and the level to which they have the motivation and the skills to use that. It's not just about physical access, it's also about an inclination to use digital channels in preference. Again, that benefits us all. So, if for anybody involved in the digital and data sector and the technology sector, really, leveling up on digital inclusion, on digital infrastructure helps us all. I think a digital workforce helps us all as well. People do move, and I think it's a good thing that people do move from public sector employment to private sector employment, back and forth. There are really strong examples of how entities like GCHQ have created an ecosystem, which is the next word. Have created an ecosystem of startup companies around itself, of companies and individuals that specialize in cyber skills, who started off their careers in GCHQ and then stepped out into the commercial world. But they can also give back, and GCHQ can draw on them for additional capacity or for very specialist expertise when it needs to. It is called Digital Health Ecosystem Wales, after all, and this interaction between the people who work in different sectors, the needs of different sectors, and how they complement. I think there's a lot of mutual benefit in that space. And then finally, standards. We all benefit from common standards. If everyone is creating isolated, bespoke systems that don't speak to each other, that creates an enormous amount of friction in the system. If everyone is working to common standards, if there are standardly well-defined data feeds, APIs, both functional APIs and data sharing APIs, I think it goes beyond the technical standards, though, standards of behavior, particularly when it comes to information governance and the security of data and the confidence with which things can be shared or not shared, clarity about relationships between commercial partners and the NHS, so that there are more standardized pathways for working together. Again, that helps everybody, because everybody understands the parameters, everybody understands what is expected of them, and we're setting out a framework within which we can all safely operate. So I think there's an enormous amount there's an enormous amount happening. It's happening very quickly. It's very, very exciting. But it's a shared common excitement, and on the theme of a collaboration conference, I think that's a good note to finish on. And my last slide just says diolch yn fawr, if I think, oh no, it doesn't, it says Q&A. So I will say diolch yn fawr, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Ifan. That was a really interesting overview of a huge amount of activity, just in a few minutes. Bearing in mind sort of, some of the huge challenges and opportunities that you outlined, looking back over the last 12 months, what's the thing, hopefully positive, that surprised you the most?
So I wouldn't say that things have surprised me. I've been the policy lead for digital since the middle of 2019. And coming into that, I knew that there was a range of views, shall we say, about the capacity of the digital system in Wales to deliver change. I don't think that I'd come to a particular view one way, or the other. I was, when COVID hit, I was about 9 months into the role, so I was still very much open-minded on it. So I wouldn't describe it as being surprised, but I would say that I'm really pleased and really impressed, actually, by how the digital system as a whole in Wales has responded. And I really want to emphasize that's not about any one group or one organisation. That speaks well of NWIS. It speaks well of health boards and trusts. The hub, as you know, because you were involved very closely in it, had over 200 offers of support from digital companies able, stepping forward to offer support for COVID response. And we have worked very closely with industry on a whole bunch of different things, from the small, like web chat, COVID diagnosis, all the way up to the sort of the All Wales platforms, where we've partnered with Microsoft and with other multinationals. So it's been fantastic, right? And you shouldn't say that. Well, it feels very strange to say that anything good has come out of COVID. I wish it had never happened. But it has happened, and not through choice. It happened to us. But I think we can, as a whole, all of us, can take real comfort and encouragement from the way that the system has responded. So not a surprise, but on reflection, I think it's been very positive. And again, it's not just Wales. The whole global community on digital and on research and innovation in health and social care. It's not social care, health and life sciences, has been enormously impressive. It really has. I mean, who could have imagined that what's been done on vaccines across the world has been done in the time it's been done? It's astounding.
Yeah. And we've talked about the need for digital workforce, digital, ecosystem. Obviously, I'm going to be excited about that. What are you most excited about, sort of coming out of the activity over the next, sort of few months? All the programs that you're talking about, all those organisations. What do you think is going to have that sort of huge impact?
Yeah, well, so I've been involved in life sciences and health for quite some time. So I was part of setting up the Life Sciences Hub, worked with MediWales for over a decade, used to lead life sciences in the economy department, and a lot of my attention at the moment is on digital specifically, but I think I'm excited about, the thing I'm most excited probably is about RNA vaccines and the design of RNA vaccines and how they work. Now, digital is a really important part of that. And linked to that, I'm also really, really excited about the power of digital and data to connect interventions to outcomes. So broadly, that's value-based healthcare. And the things that are there. But I think the best thing is that you don't know what is going to happen over the horizon. So that is by far the best thing, right? It all moves so quickly, it develops and evolves very, very rapidly. It's part of innovation that you don't know what the next big thing or the next exciting thing and who's going to make a breakthrough or in what area or where. So I wouldn't want to pick out a particular program Obviously I'm really excited about Digital Health and Care Wales. It's a whole new organisation focused only on digital. So for me, as the digital policy lead, that's fantastic. Right? That's great. And I'm really excited about how the opportunity we've got to develop the workforce. Digital is a whole chapter in the health and social care workforce, so it's a very strong theme. Digital comes through as a strong section in the National Clinical Framework that was published a couple of weeks ago. So I definitely feel digital is getting a lot more prominence. So in my work life, I'm really excited about that. But just as an enthusiast for technology innovation, technology-led innovation, I think the whole stuff around genomic screening, precision medicine, precision treatment, which is RNA vaccines, and capturing the immune system to generate its own defenses, I think that's going to be transformative.
Fantastic, thank you. So a question from Gwyn in the chat. As he said, he's not very good at giving up control, so he's got questions for you. So he said, well done to the whole team, because the effort in building Digital Health and Care Wales has been not just within NWIS, but I know that it's taken a lot of time from Welsh Government and others to make sure that transition has happened on time, which is a huge achievement in this day and age, and has happened so smoothly. He's asked, where would the first point of contact be for organisations seeking to engage with, well, actually, didn't say, Gwyn, Welsh Government or Digital Health and Care Wales? Or both?
Well, I'd say Digital Health Ecosystem Wales. So I'd encourage people to use DHEW. And I'm not saying this just to make you happy, Helen, although I'm sure it will. But that's what the Life Sciences Hub is for. So the Life Sciences Hub is there to, on my last slide, I talked about standards, frameworks for cooperation between the public sector and the private sector and universities. That's what the hub as a whole is there to do, and that's what DHEW is there to do, to bring more assurance, more confidence, more structure, more a sort of a framework for that engagement. And I mentioned the huge volume of proactive offers of support that came from digital as part of COVID response. Look, I hope that continues, and I hope that companies are stepping forward. That said, right, it's important to remember that the NHS is a gigantic organisation, and quite rightly, it's got procurement regulations and procurement processes. So it can't just completely freestyle and take an exciting new product and within 2 weeks deploy it across the whole of Wales without going through large organisation due diligence, just as any large organisation would need to do, especially one which is in a life and death sort of service. But with that caveat about managing expectations about the speed with which brand new software can be deployed across the whole of the NHS estate, and the mechanisms that necessarily they have to go through, I think it's better to coordinate and funnel contact rather than coming from all directions, because the whole digital community is not that many people across the whole of Wales, and it's better to structure that engagement through something like DHEW.
Thank you. And there's a bit of a follow-up question. Alan Thomas has asked how the ecosystem fits in with Digital Health and Care Wales. Digitally, NWIS is a co-funder, co-partner of Digital Health Ecosystem Wales, and work very closely with the Life Sciences Hub. And this is a grossly simplified arrangement for anybody. So the main role of NWIS and DHCW is to provide the technical interoperability platform. That is, the APIs, the defined software development kits, the defined data feeds that describe in a technical sense how external third-party partners can engage with our digital infrastructure and our digital systems. And the main job of the hub is to do the if you like, the people software bit, the horrible term wetware, right? Hardware, software, and wetware. Wetware are the people who use the hardware and the software. But the hub is there to bring a coordinated engagement with that technical platform, because a technical platform is not worth anything unless there are people using it. But people can't use it unless there's a technical platform. So it's this interconnectedness, which is hard coded. See what I did there? Which is hard-coded into DHEW, and NWIS has always been a partner, and DHEW will continue to be. It'll carry on with that function. Brilliant. Well, I think your presentation has stunned the audience. You've satisfied all of their questions. So it just it just sort of sits with me to thank you for your time and effort, and for that, fantastic overview of where we are and what the future might look like, even if we can't see over the horizon. Thank you again for being part of MediWales Connects today. And I think we're now moving on to a break. 4 companies that we're going to hear from now. We're going to explore what the reality of digital transformation of healthcare means in GP practices and hospitals across the UK in the last 12 months. We're going to hear from 4 companies who've made a real impact for patients and clinicians over the past year, digitising what had previously been face-to-face contact. We're going to hear from each company in turn, and then there'll be an opportunity to ask the panel questions. So first of all, we're going to hear from Ellen Half-Davis, who founded Aparito in 2014. And during 2020, saw Aparito's product portfolio and team expand to support the NHS in Wales and across the UK. So Ellen, if you would like to kick off.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Diolch am y gwahoddiad i ymuno heddiw. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today and share our experience at Aparito. So hopefully you can see my slides. So for those that don't know, Aparito is a Welsh-based medtech company. We're based at Wrexham Technology Park next to Wrexham Maelor. And for the last 6 years, we've primarily been supporting patients in clinical trials. So we have patients in Japan, South Africa, North America, using our technology as part of pivotal regulated clinical trials. But more recently, we've also been involved in a lot of long COVID studies in that regard as well. In this presentation, I'm going to focus on sort of our COVID response, to give you some updates in that regard. So I'm not going to sort of spend too much time on the background, but this was triggered off initially with an NHS funding to look at how we could support oncology patients to reduce the need for admissions and to be mindful of the increased or reduced capacity for the hospital. And we were working with Pasquale, the oncology consultant, and Dawn and Nick in Ysbyty Gwynedd to look at how we could sort of support these patients remotely. And the aim was to demonstrate the feasibility of multidimensional remote monitoring using a smartphone app and wearable sensors, and to look at how that could inform the clinical team in their clinical decisions making. North Wales, I'm sure you'll be mindful, is quite a different geography to some other areas. It's very rural. Patients can drive for up to an hour and a half. There's limited parking, but also there's challenges that connectivity is not always so great. So it had quite a geography specific requirement as well in that regard. So we implemented the technology, and it was done literally within 2 weeks of the funding being awarded. So we configured deployments that was in both Welsh and in English, allowed the clinicians to create patients, link up to the smartphone devices of the patients themselves, and the wearable devices also integrated to the same software. So the training and the steps was kept really quite simple to try and support the clinical team in their time. And this is just a very quick illustration. So patients downloaded the app via their app store, whether it be Google Play or iOS iPhone. We use this QR code, which means that we do not need to capture any email addresses. We don't ask for phone numbers. And this QR code then just bonds the patient's smartphone app with the clinical dashboard. The wearables are integrated directly into our software, which means we do not rely on any third-party software. because we use their hardware, but the data from those sensors comes into our software, which means that we also have then more visibility and control for any software updates. And then the patient's ready to engage with the app in the modules that's been configured. For this study, we only used sort of the text in terms of the symptom checker, but in other studies, we do a lot of video-based assessment, voice, photos, and the wearables, of course. For this study, we selected the Vivo Smart wearable. So it is a consumer grade device, not a medical grade device. But at that time, obviously, there was a very big shortage of pulse oximeters and also the ability to have continuous data as opposed to spot check, and the additional data parameters that the Garmin provided was why we did opt for this one. So every day the patient would get an alert on their phone to say that it was time to complete their symptom checker. This would come through in the morning and in the evening to start off with. We did reduce the frequency of it to once a day later on, but the data was then available in real time so that the clinicians could then see the data, and the data was then color-coded according to the new score, the National Early Warning Score, which Christian Soubey from Ysbyty Gwynedd was instrumental in leading. And then the wearable data just passively, uploaded itself, except for when we asked for additional vital sign spot checks of the oxygen saturations. And then, as I say, the clinicians could then see engagements and real data on the portal. We obviously had to go through all the DPIA. So there was a consent form, there was information of how to opt out included in that. And I think this was one of the real key successes of the response, was that we were able to get all the approvals from DPIA, the opt-out wording and everything configured into the app very, very quickly in that regard. Oops, my functionalities going a bit funny there. So 59 patients verbally consented within the first 2 weeks, and then 44 of them went on to activate the app. And you can see that there was really high engagement for the first 20 days, which is what we were sort of using it for initially in the NHSX funding. And we're now obviously converting it to the longer term cancer care one, which I'll go on to talk about later. But these were, an age range from 31 to 79, a sort of average age of 61. So certainly towards the older age group, which we were pleased that we were able to get high engagement with some of the higher, the older patients as well. So some of the process lessons that we did learn was that, interestingly, in the hospital, because of the hospital wall and the location, that not all the phones had connectivity. So there was no phone signal because of where the ward was in the hospital, and the Wi-Fi in the hospital was just too poor. So they couldn't download the app and connect it because of poor connectivity within the hospital walls. So very often the nurses had to take the phones outside to get connectivity and then bring it back to the patients. And obviously that's not feasible from, a sort of practical use of the team's time. And also we sort of realized that staff didn't want to use their own work email to set people at home with a QR code that they couldn't activate within the hospital. We had a few patients that sort of refused, and we had a few that didn't have smart devices that were capable of downloading apps, or the smart devices didn't have Bluetooth capabilities for the data transfer. And as you would imagine from this age demographics, A lot of them did say that they use mobile phones, but they always get their children to set it all up for them. And it's that setting up process that because they were in lockdown and didn't have access to the children, that was harder for them just to get the initial momentum to start with. But once they did, they got really good high engagement after. So it was generally very well received. We had some issues with the wearable more so than the app. The choice of the wearable, the face was too small for the visual sort of vision capabilities and dexterity of the target age group, and we've now changed that. And also we reduced the frequency of the symptom checker to once a day at a time convenient for them. And then the need for the spot checks, if their saturations was too low, needed to be sort of readjusted for. There was an option for the Life to have family members linked up, but actually none of the families did register for that one. So for the first duration period here, there was sort of 617 symptom checkers completed, which is quite a high number for the number of patients, and it was good to see that not many of them suffered with too many daily symptoms, at least. I'm trying to rush through this just to get to the lessons learnt and the next steps. We have been integrating and evolving it a lot to learn from the processes of what worked and what didn't work. And these are some of the points I mentioned earlier in terms of changing the wearable to a larger face one, and giving data view, so continuous data view. So the patients could see their own data for that day, but they also want to see their own data for that trend moving forward. And we configured a new clinical dashboard that evolved as the study changed, so that it was more user-friendly for the data points that the clinical team wanted to see. We've published in the Clinical Cancer Informatics about our roadmap in this regard. So it sort of really illustrates how we plan to embrace the digital remote monitoring concept for cancer patients in the District General Hospital. Obviously, please do go and have a look at how we see this roadmap evolving, and how it's going to become far more customizable according to the patient preference and severity of disease, which we hope will also be supplemented with some audit results that we're currently underway in doing as well. And then outside of cancer patients, we worked with Chris Sube, as I mentioned, for monitoring COVID positive patients or suspect COVID patients at home using the same solution, but we extended it to 4 GP practices in the Llyn Arfon Peninsula, where they again either used the oxygen spot check pulse oximeter they already had, or in some cases the Garmin, or when they were discharged from home. So it was good to sort of start evolving primary care. And Chris Sube was instrumental in the SOPs of sort of clinical responsibility, but also really highlighting, when the GP practice were responsible for their own patients' care versus when the Ysbyty Gwynedd clinical team were, and making the most of when clinical staff were shielding or not able to be in frontline clinical care to be responsible for supporting these patients. Outside this, we have got another project with Wrexham Mailer where we've deployed a digital tool for supporting prehab patients, so to give them the information required about exercise, nutrition, planning for surgery. So it's similar technology in the fact that patients download it on their own app, and then according to what their surgery date is, they have alerts every day or every few days on how to prepare for their surgery. And then in the Howe, the health board with Jennifer, we've been co-creating a paediatric tool for supporting bowel and bladder incontinence, that should say in children, which has been a real joy to work with Jen as well. So hopefully I've just given you a very quick overview of the sort of different ways that we've been utilising our digital platform across the different clinical context and across the different clinical care in Wales. So I'll say diolch yn fawr iawn, especially to our clinical partners and the patients, and hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Ellen. That was fascinating. So much achievement in just 12 months, you know, to sort of develop, roll out, iterate a new product. That must have been a very busy time for you and the team.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's that iteration that's quite important. You know, we need to be mindful of patient safety, absolutely. But what we don't want to do is just stick with old systems that are not as efficient or user-friendly as they should be. And the agility to improve the technology, I think, is a real important one.
Thank you. So next up, we're going to hear from Stefan Gimlet, who was a practice manager and cluster lead for 17 years before leaving primary care to develop a patient-facing app, which is now being used in over 100 GP surgeries in Wales and primary care networks in England.
Yeah, can you all see me? Okay.
Yes, we can see and hear you, Stefan.
Okay, good. So hopefully you can share my screen. You can see my screen. So yeah, my name's Stefan. I was practice manager and cluster lead in a GP surgery, or a few GP surgeries in South Wales for 17 years. And we worked a lot with patient participation groups across Wales, and we talk to patients about digital services in primary care. A lot of surgeons now are using a lot of online triage providers, online repeats. They point patients towards online resources for health services. But patients wanted to have one entry point into all the digital and non-digital services, clinical and non-clinical services offered by GP surgeries in their own practice and also in the wider community. So we looked at how patients accessed our services, and particularly in our websites. We worked with a lot of GP surgeries across Wales, particularly in Cardiff and Vale, and we found that 81% of all traffic to GP websites came from smart devices, and the majority of those smart devices were mobile phones. And practice websites are maybe not built to be as user-friendly as possible for mobile use. So we looked at another alternative, and this is when we started to look at apps and the app usage. Apps have been quite prevalent in NHS England for about 5 or 6 years now, with NHS, with the NHS having their own app. But with quite limited capabilities, i.e. only being able to book appointments or order repeat medication online, whereas in Wales we offer quite a lot more services. As clusters, we work together as clusters of GPs, and we work with the third sector and a lot of partners in clusters to offer services in the community, particularly voluntary sector with link workers and social prescribers. So we wanted to give one entry point really to patients to find everything they needed from their GP surgery and wider community. So we're about 13, 14 months ago now, we started to build the app, and this is what we've built. Hopefully you can see this screen here. When patients download the app for free from from their app store, they can download the app and search for their GP surgery, and their home screen brings them to their GP surgery now. So this is our this is the home screen for our fictional GP surgery, Grange Road Surgery and Grange Road GP cluster. So the patients can scroll and access them from the homepage all of the services that are offered by their GP surgery. They can click on, they can find information or phone the surgery straight away. I'll go through the features of the app, but mostly the benefits of this to patients and practices. So they can access information. If they click here for Save Life Cymru, they can see videos then in English or Welsh. The app is available bilingually. They can see videos within the app and educational stuff as well. They can link off to the practice's online triage service, so they no longer have to phone in to give their symptoms over the phone. We all see reports, don't we, on the news about high call volumes or patients struggling to get through. Well, on average, in my old practice, we had 14,000 patients. We only had 3 or 4 receptionists. On a Monday, we used to take 900 phone calls. Well, for 4 receptionists, that's a really high call volume. So now we're able to offer patients the ability to consult with a GP online, send the symptoms, and we can better manage then in practice what does come through and help us prioritize then. So this would link the patient off to an online triage service, and they can go through then the steps that we build, and they can see submit their query then to the practice about what their new or ongoing clinical symptom may be. We also link to the NHS 111 Wales symptom checker. So if the surgery is closed and they just want some advice, they can look for the symptom checker there. It'll also advise them what's appropriate for them, i.e. do they go to the GP surgery, pharmacy, MIU or A&E. And then again, that helps to educate patients as to what services should be accessing. They can also book appointments online, but obviously during COVID, GP surgeries now have gone to whole triage. So we do also have a management dashboard for GPs for surgeries that they can sort of pinpoint or sort of put in what they want patients to do. So you can see here now that the ability to book online appointments is available. If we untick that and save that, and if I go back into the app now, the booking appointments button is there. But if I refresh this, then it takes the ability for patients to book appointments out of the app, so they can't do that. So hopefully when COVID is over and we can book appointments again, we can go back to that service. But then again, there's another button here to order repeat medication. So again, patients go into the surgery to fill out a form to order repeats. Well, that's quite difficult during COVID. So so we link now off to the My Health Online system, so patients can order repeat medication. Again, it's all in one place, so patients don't have to go to 3 different websites to do 3 different services. They can do it all from one place. Register for online services. So this is a problem during COVID, where patients wanted to register for online services because they couldn't visit their surgery, but they couldn't. The usual service is that they have to go into surgery, fill out a form, produce ID, and then they can register. But now we allow registration through the app, and that gets sent digitally to the practice, and they can go through the registration, register patients for online services. So patients no longer need to go into practice. Health resources. Again, GPs sort of will refer patients off to NHS resources, and they're given web addresses but patients wanted everything in one place from patient feedback. So we've built a health resources section for patients. We're now a syndicate partner with NHS Digital and NHSX. We've imported through an API all of the health resources for patients, so they can either scroll down or they can use the search functionality. We use keyword searches. So if I was searching for vaccinations, here, that would bring up the search then and look at the vaccinations available. It brings up the whole schedule of vaccinations for anybody. But also surgeries have localized pathways, not just national pathways. So practices in their dashboard can put, if they have self-referral pathways, for example, for physiotherapy or mental health or podiatry, which we do, they can add their own health resources quite simply by adding a resource here. So the patient, so for example, if I wanted to find stop smoking services in my area, I could type in smoking, and then it brings it up. This is a stop smoking service in my area, locally to me in Swansea. So it's not just national resources. We help practices now to communicate what they're doing on a much more localized area, so patients can find stuff in their own locality. Then there's a news section in the app, and this helps GP surgeries really tell patients what's going on in the news, in their surgery. So if surgeries are bringing on a new system, they can educate the patients and show short, informative videos. Patient feedback was that they'd much prefer to see a short 2-minute video than they would read a big PDF. So we can really interact with patients and educate them a lot more through an app this way. Patient feedback is apps are far easier to use and navigate than websites. So we've made this as user-friendly as possible. And again, it is available in English and Welsh. We don't want to exclude patients. We've partnered with Digital Communities Wales and the Good Things Foundation to offer a digital education session or module for patients. So again, this is available in English and Welsh, and it's simple things like how to use a mouse, so how to use a touchscreen in the NHS surgery, how to order repeats online through the online service provided by the practice. So again, this is available in English and in Welsh, and it's a free service we're offering through the app for patients who are maybe a bit scared of using new tech in primary care. But it's inevitable. We are moving forward with tech, so we'd like to educate patients on that journey as well. There's a health hub for patients, so they can manage their own health. A lot of patients in primary care, when I was in management, patients used to come to surgery and say, I'm out of meds. When did you run out? Yesterday. Then we have to run around trying to get a script ready for patients so they're not out of medication. They can favorite medications. We've imported the BNF, so they can look for the medication, they can find the medication, they can find information on it, when to take it. If patients are on inhaler, they can watch videos about inhaler techniques, but they can also remind themselves of when to take the medication, and the app will also remind them when their medication is about to run out. So 7 days before the medication runs out, the app will remind them to say, right, your terbinafine is running out in 7 days. Phone your pharmacy, phone the surgery, or log online and order your medication. Again, putting the health of the patient in their own hands, and they can manage their own health. Again, if they're on if they have a chronic disease, if they're diabetic, or if they've got asthma or COPD, they can favorite this, and then they can find out more information about how to self-manage their medication, their chronic disease. Watch short videos, again, produced by NHS Digital in English and Welsh. And again, it'll remind them to phone the surgery to book their annual review clinic, because we employ a lot of staff in primary care, and a lot of our time is spent reminding patients of when the clinics are due and inviting them by letter. So the app will remind them when the clinic is due, and hopefully that'll reduce the cost of sending letters to patients and reduce the staff time in surgery of contacting patients to invite them into clinic. Then there's information about the surgery. If patients want to know about the surgery, they can call them. Some surgeries allow patients to email them, but some don't, prefer not to have an email sent. So again, in the dashboard, you can see here now in the app, there's an email button there. If we wanted to disable that function, we just take out the email address in the app's dashboard. And if I refresh the app now, then the ability to take an email out. They can find information on the opening times, if there are branch surgeries, directions, or telephone numbers, and so forth. They can see information about the team. So they wanted to know information about what people do, it is responsibility. So again, we've put a section here for teams. There's information about out of hours. It'll tell patients when it's appropriate to phone A&E, when not, when it's appropriate to phone for an ambulance. They can call out of hours directly. They can look at out of hours to see what's appropriate, what out of hours do. They can phone 999. It tells them when to phone 999. So there's lots of information there. There's also a calendar on. So we integrate quite heavily in primary care now with third sector. So we give access to third sector partners where they can also populate the app. So if patients want to know about, so there's a vaccine clinic here, so that they can find out when the COVID vaccination clinic is. There's a second dose vaccination clinic here. They can see short informative videos about the vaccine. They can find befriending services, so that if there are third sector partners working in the cluster, they can put information about friendship services, find information, link in with Age UK, and get short information videos there. There's a call for help. If somebody needs help, there's a telephone number they can call directly from the app, and there's a referral pathway so patients can self-refer. Again, bringing more community services into the app, so patients can find out not just what's on available clinically. Patients don't need prescriptions for everything. There are social prescribing or non-clinical prescribing, so they can find a lot more services in the area. So that does help us to work with the third sector, particularly link workers or care navigators. They can put information into the app. There is also, we have had direct patient feedback now, and we're building a new button in the app for administrative requests. So we did an audit of practices, and 52% of all calls coming into a practice are administrative requests, such as I want a fit note or a doctor's letter. So we're building a new pathway now, and it'll look like this. So the button will allow patients to request through the app a doctor's letter, fit note, a question or about a referral update or status of a secondary care referral, discuss a test result or something else. So instead of having to phone, the benefit to patients then is they don't have to phone the surgery, sit in a queue for 3 or 4 minutes, and then get through to the receptionist to request an admin request. The benefit of the practice is they don't have to take the call and then put that onto their workflow. All the non-clinical requests can come in through the app, and if that reduces call volumes by 30 or 40%, that gives a better chance then for people who do need clinical help to get through far quicker, and it's far easier system for patients as well. Another thing, through the app we can send push notifications to patients, so we can. Practices always found it difficult to sort of communicate digitally with patients. When we closed in my practice for half-day training, we just put a poster up in the door to say closed for half-day, come back tomorrow at 8 o'clock. That's not really proactive. So we can send notifications to patients now in English and Welsh, and we build, the patients can do, the surgeries can send this from their dashboard. So for example, if I wanted to send a patient survey, if I want to run a survey, we put the survey on the reception desk, patients would fill it out, they'd give us the paper form back, and we'd collate all the information. Well, under COVID, that's not really great now. So we can send a notification to patients to send patient survey. We can then link that then to a patient survey and send it out, and that's sent to anybody who has the app for the surgery, but also for the cluster. So it can go to instantly to a cluster population for 40, 50,000 patients. If I refresh this now, the app would come through as it would any other notification on the patient's phone if it's just sitting on their desk. And once they open the app, they can see the notification here, and they can click on the survey, take the survey digitally, submit the results, and then we collect the information and it's sent back directly to the patient, to the surgery, and they can send anything through the app. And there's also an audit trail there, so they can see the patient, how many patients, when they were sent out, how many patients read it. There's also full analytics built into the app. So we now have big data, Wales-wide, cluster-wide, and practice-wide. We can narrow that down to dates. So practices can see really what patient interaction is through the app. So if they've sent out a notification to patient to say that there's a mental health counselling service available on a Wednesday afternoon in the surgery, they can see how many patients have clicked on that in real time and get information and real big data feedback on as I said, on a practice-wide basis or a cluster-wide basis. They can then make informed decisions as to what patients really want, and what they're clicking on, what resources they're clicking on. You can see here that the stop smoking resource is quite high on what patients are clicking on. Vaccinations is quite high. The triage and the digital education is quite high there. So they can see what patients are looking at straight away. Again, if we go into the what's on calendar, we can see the patients surgeries. We invite patients for clinics. Again, they phone the surgery to book an appointment. Well, maybe that's not the best way of doing it. So we now allow patients to book appointments online. So if they've had an invitation to a diabetic annual review clinic, they can either call the surgery or they can book online. That takes it to the online booking system. They can get more information about how to self-manage. Again, watch small informative videos. So the point of all of this is to help patients to self-manage their health, and for patients and for surgeries and clusters to work better together and with their other partners, and get real information from patients as to what they want. The next steps for the app, we've had loads of feedback from patients. They want a few more calculators. So we're building blood pressure calculators into the app so they can measure their blood pressure and again send that into the clinical system. We are working with NHS Digital in England. we're hoping to get right back into the clinical system quite soon, and we are working to get NHS login. But the patient only has to log in once, and then they have access to everything. We're building FEV calculators and a lot of calculators for patients, so they can self-monitor from home, and then submit that information to the patient, to the surgery. They can send photos securely to the GP, so patients so they can see and self-monitor patients there. So that's the app for us. It's now being used in over 100 practices in Wales and over 100 CCGs, over 100 practices in CCGs and PCNs in England, and a few now have come on board in Scotland. And we have feedback from GP surgeries. It's always evolving. We've got a new some new developments in the app quite soon, which will let patients to register or arrive themselves for appointments remotely in a car. So if we do have a lockdown next year, patients don't have to go into surgery to arrive themselves. They can click a button on the app to say I'm here, and the surgery can call patients through. So there's lots of new developments in the app. Am I out of time?
Yes, you are, Stefan.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right.
Just about to come in, but I didn't want to interrupt you because it's just definitely shown such huge, and again, you know, when you look at both what you and Ellen are saying, it's been that sort of rapid iteration based on feedback that's making that real difference. So thank you, Stefan.
You're welcome.
So next up, we're going to hear from David Loughran from Concentric Health. So this is, and Concentric have been working in Wales for some time, looking at digital consent processes, so looking at secondary care. David, can I hand over to you?
Hello, you absolutely can. Hopefully I can share my screen.
Yep, we can see that.
Does that look sensible?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Okay, good. So I'm David Loughran, CEO of Concentric Health. So I'm surgeon by training, have been involved in kind of health tech for the last 6 years or so, with experience of scaling various health technologies globally over those years. But Concentric is a South Wales-based digital health company, as Helen mentions, digitally transforming the consent process. So I'm going to keep this really quick and simple, but to reflect on the fact that remote digital solutions have kept the NHS doing what it absolutely needed to keep doing over the last 12 months. And with that experience, we better understand how they are or how they could be used to help the system. So I'm going to use a short example, a kind of story of what that's looked like for us over the last 12 months, give a bit of the Welsh context, and then share how you can potentially help. So as a kind of just to set the scene in terms of context, so Concentric is a digital consent application. Our mission is to transform how we make decisions about our health. So decisions informed by patient outcomes and shared by patient and clinician. So if you think about the current paper consent form before any treatment, operation, procedure, oncology treatment, anything like that, usually that's an A3 paper, carbon copy, yellow piece of paper that a clinician documents some risks, complications on it, and a patient will kind of sign their consent. But that has lots and lots of issues, which is beyond the kind of scope of this presentation, but lots of issues for patients, clinicians, and their organisations. But Concentric allows digital remote consent pathways, makes it really easy for clinicians to share evidence-based, personalised information with patients, so that we get to that end goal of informed shared decisions. And it's now used across a number of NHS trusts in the UK and internationally, and I'll kind of give a couple of examples. So the North West London example is the kind of most striking example of how things accelerated for us over the last 12 months. So March 2020, no surprises here, suddenly a real need to deliver remote pre-treatment care to keep urgent cancer, urgent surgery treatment going safely. So we didn't want to be bringing patients in for appointments as they had been doing in the weeks before surgery in that kind of preparatory phase, if at all possible, because there were so many patient safety risks and impact on their outcomes if we needed to do that. So lots of new information requirements, so conversations around the risk profile of catching COVID if you came in versus delaying treatment and all those kind of things. And there was a big risk of major compromises to care if we didn't optimize those pathways. So others around the kind of Concentric deployment sites were bringing patients in for those kind of risky outpatient appointments, or defaulting back to the kind of bad way of doing it in terms of making consent decisions on the day of surgery. So our timing was very kind of interesting at that point. So Concentric had basically been used in breast surgery in North West London for about 2 weeks. And in March 2020 into early April, they noticed that that team had very easily been able to transition to virtual consent consultations. It was already integrated with Cerner. Those teams weren't having to think about how are we going to manage this, what additional paper logistics around sending consent forms or getting patients to post consent forms back, getting those to different private sites, because they were operating often in the private sector away from their kind of host hospitals, and all these kind of complicated process being put in place in order to stop needing to bring patients in for those consent consultations the week before surgery. So very quickly there was a decision to go from that pilot to a rollout across Imperial, Chelsea and Westminster. That was a very kind of quick decision, and it was basically a clinician green light to say, if this helps, use it, and it's kind of up to you whether you do it or not. And what we saw was that led to a very kind of rapid rollout across North West London, and just to kind of highlight one of many quotes I could have picked out. So I had time to think about what was being said, straightforward and quick, information sent to my phone, so I had it on hand should I need it. Paperless also ideal during COVID, very happy and grateful. So that was from a 76-year-old patient with breast cancer in May 2020, who otherwise would have come in for an appointment a few days before surgery, all the anxiety that brings and things like that, and was shared their own information, could digest that in their own time, in their own space, share that easily with others, even at that point in time. So fast forward to 12 months, so we've shown that we've avoided 1,200 physical outpatient appointments during that time. And interestingly, so there was a clinical evaluation at Imperial in October 2020, in the kind of lull before the November wave, to look at is this something we want to make sure we really embed and kind of take the next step beyond where we are currently. And all clinicians supported continued use and embedding and bringing this in as the default mechanism, rather than a kind of green light if you want to use it, which I think is very unusual in secondary care, especially when you think about something that had been very quickly brought into practice and didn't have the project management and the deployment plans and all the kind of complex project management that would usually go around a trust-wide deployment. And we've now supported over 5,500 patients to make these key treatment decisions since March 2020. Those are those kind of first patients in March 2020, and we've got to those numbers during the last 12 months. So in terms of digital consent in Wales, so clearly lots of the same pressures, same challenges as what we've kind of talked about in North West London. And there were clinicians from most health boards that reached out to use Concentric and other digital consent solutions during those kind of early 2020 months. And pleased to say these were fast deployments. Actually, our quickest IG sign-off internationally was in Wales at 7 days. Some reasons why that was kind of quicker. These are non-integrated solutions. But it did show that we could in Wales say yes, clinicians want to do something, and we can get through the process of saying yep, start using it clinically within 7 days. And the health board where that's been kind of mostly used in Wales, smaller volumes than lots of the other sites outside of Wales, but that's fine. So Swansea Bay, we've seen this is kind of data from a couple of weeks ago. So 365 consent episodes, 2 clinical specialties, so that's colorectal and breast surgery at Swansea Bay, by 21 clinicians. You can see the volume of use, and that skew just in terms of kind of digital inclusion, which Ellen particularly kind of spoke about. So we can see a skew of age demographics to the right, as you would expect for the population. So this isn't, it's not a solution that's just being used for the young patients, but not for the older patients. In terms of evaluation, so these are kind of some of the survey results, but basically it shows that clinicians in Wales, as we've seen elsewhere, support the use of these digital technologies being introduced into their clinical practice. A couple of people saying that, not currently ready, and most of the themes around that is in terms of integration, as you'd expect. So these were non-integrated deployments, and that just adds to some of the challenges of process and uploading documents into Welsh Clinical Portal and that kind of stuff. But patient feedback, this is very convincing. Excellent experience, across those age demographics, easy to use, good information shared, makes sense for it to be electronic, and great to have it emailed to me instantly. So there's nothing that we're seeing in terms of Wales that tells us that there's anything different to what we've seen for kind of much bigger trust-wide deployments by default. In England, those are North West London, but Cornwall, Jersey, a number of other NHS trusts as well. And there's quite a lot of happening in the space in Wales at the moment. So Vaughan Gething was speaking in Zenith about 3 weeks ago in response to the Cumberledge report. So this is a quote from Vaughan saying, the Welsh Hospital has recently commissioned a pilot programme of digital consent platforms within a number of NHS Wales organisations. If successful, and I expect it will be, this will result in an all-Wales procurement exercise to be rolled out to all of Wales's health boards. And that will not be a matter of choice. So that's that pilot deployment across all Welsh health boards is planned for the next quarter, with lots of learnings from Swansea Bay and others of what works, what the requirements are, what we expect from that pilot, and what is still to be found out. So if you're interested in finding out more about that plan or to be involved in as an involved specialty, then contact Liz Baines. Liz is from the Welsh Hospital. And there's still some time to get involved in the kind of planning bit of that deployment. And just very quickly to mention, so we're raising investment as Contemporary Health currently, being led by angel investors. So if you're interested in finding out more or to see our investment deck, just email me on this email address here. So just to reflect, from my perspective, what we've seen over the last 12 months is that remote digital solutions kept the NHS doing what it absolutely needed to keep doing. And with that experience, we better understand how they are or could help the system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. That is a perfect summation, I think, of the experience of a lot of people over the last 12 months. I think there's been a huge cultural change that has really enabled that excitement to use new technology in new ways. But I think what you said is the experience of so many people, whether they're clinicians or businesses or informaticians.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, but we'll come up to that. We have one more speaker left. So we're about to hear from Gary Howe from Connect Health. Gary led the setup and successful delivery of Physio Now as the first of the Digital Solution Fund pilots in 2020. I can hand over to Gary, please.
Thank you, Helen. Can you see me, hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see your screen.
Lovely. Just checking I'm in the right right setting.
You just need to put it on presenter mode.
Yeah. There we go. So thank you, Helen. Great to be here to speak to you all today about Physio Now. As Helen mentioned, my name is Gary Howe. I'm a Senior Service Transition Manager with Connect. So my role is to set up and deliver new services, of which Physio Now in Wales was one such one. I'm a physiotherapist by background, but my role now is more operational, which I think is probably to the betterment of my patients. I work for Connect Health, so just a very brief introduction as to who we are. We're based up in the northeast of England and deliver MSK services throughout England and work in partnership with 50 CCGs or health boards in England. We on average see around 370,000 new referrals per year, and that's primarily in musculoskeletal physio, our CATs or CMAT services, pain rheumatology and talking therapies, and we also deliver occupational health services to over 100 businesses. We work as a change partner with a number of NHS trusts and to deliver more streamlined pathways across the service for physiotherapy related matters. So just to give a little bit of context as to why an Irishman based up in the northeast of England is speaking to you all in Wales today, and that's part of the Digital Solutions Fund, which was set up by Helen and her team in Life Sciences in collaboration with Wales Government. And Physio Now was one of the projects that was successfully selected through the tender process for that. All the health boards in Wales were approached and asked if they wanted to partner with Physio Now to help deliver it, and 2 were selected in Cumtaff and Howe, and we delivered the pilot to over 1,000 patients in Wales between August and December of last year. And it was highly successful, and I want to discuss a little bit about that today. But first off, what is Physio Now? So it's a digital online tool where you can complete a musculoskeletal assessment online. And that's basically the subjective history that a physiotherapist would ordinarily complete with a patient at the first assessment. So that history gathering part of it. It's available 24/7, 365 days a year, multiple languages to include Welsh, and you can self-refer directly into it. It's clinically led, so our senior clinical leadership team were involved in the development of that. And these are the type of people who speak internationally, develop nice guidelines. And they wrote or underpinned the decision-making tree that guides patient through the process. So there's over 3,000 different scenarios or pathways that a patient will sort of go through seamlessly. And we believe by doing that we get it right first time or GERF, so that by the end of the assessment, the patient will be directed to the right person at the right time in the right place, so that you're prioritized in order of your need rather than the date that you were referred. And we'll speak a lot in Connect about our 3 main stakeholders and how we can benefit them, and that's our clinicians, our staff, our patients, and the system. So I wanted to talk about how Physio Now benefited all those 3 components within Wales during our pilot, and how it does that in our services in England. The bar graph shows you on the left-hand column the 5 different outcomes that a patient can receive at the end of Physio Now. So whether they need an urgent appointment in 111 for non-physiotherapy related matters, so your cancers, your cauda equina, those type of things. If they need to see an urgent physio, a physio just as part of a normal time frame, etc. And what we wanted to do as part of the pilot was evaluate. So if a patient goes through the Physio Now assessment and then go to see their physio at the first appointment, does the physio agree that the person was in the right place at the right time and seeing the right person? And we were delighted to report that we had 99.9% clinical agreement with the decision making of Physio Now. So that proves it's a safe and reliable tool that can be used for all. Our next major stakeholder that I wanted to talk about were our patients. So every patient who completed the Physio Now consultation received an anonymized feedback form, which they were asked to complete. And some of the buzzwords are on the right-hand side there in the word chart in terms of the ones that come out the most often, and overwhelmingly positive for Physio Now. And patients simply love it, really. And our 82% positive friends and family tests would sort of allude to that. And we asked them why they liked it. And the bar graph on the bottom left-hand corner there will show you some of the main reasons for that. Saves time. You don't need to take time off work to attend an appointment or sacrifice any of your family time or as much of it. And saves you money in terms of you don't have to travel to your first appointment. And it's just generally more convenient for patients, and that's why they like it. And these are just some of the examples of more specific feedback that the patients gave us. The first one sort of alludes to that COVID response in terms of a lot of pathways were shut off, or GPs quite naturally didn't want you to attend for non-urgent things. Well, that's only going to lead into a backlog or longer waiting lists at the end of it. So by keeping pathways open, by using technology such as Physio Now, you can sort of alleviate some of that. And the second point just generally alludes to how convenient it was. And the third one sort of feeds into that easing the pressure in the system. And the fourth one at the bottom is really one of the key ones for me in terms of, we really do believe it is the future in terms of technology at the front end of pathways. This is going to be a mainstay within physiotherapy services nationally and internationally in years to come. Some other additional patient stats that we gathered and has been alluded to by Stefan before in terms of that this type of technology can often be seen as maybe a barrier for lay elderly or the older population. What we actually find in our pilot and replicated across our services in England is that more patients over the age of 60 use the technology rather than in the 18 to 30 bracket. Our oldest patient in Wales was 92. So age is truly about a mindset, and we certainly haven't found that physio now has been a barrier in that regard. We also wanted to look at the time when patients completed physio now, and we asked them, were they happy that it was available 24/7? 89% were very satisfied with that. Not quite so sure why the 11% weren't happy with that, but regardless, what we found was that 1 in 3 patients access physio now outside of those sort of core hours when physio departments would normally be open to 9 to 5. So it's great to see that. And what we also find, which is quite interesting, is that almost a quarter of those patients ended up having an urgent outcome or requiring urgent physio assessment. And it doesn't take a big leap to say, what would those patients have done at 8 o'clock in the evening when they were, if they didn't have the likes of physio now? Would they have attended a walk-in centre? Would they have attended A&E and just caused more pressure on already overburdened systems in there? And that sort of leads me on to talking about the system, our third major stakeholder in terms of how we benefited it. So as I mentioned, you can self-refer using physio now. And what we found in our pilot was that over 60% of patients choose to access it in that manner, so they didn't need to see a GP or a healthcare professional first. And that has huge benefits for the system in terms of GP appointments can be better utilised to see non-MSK problems and your more urgent sort of heart cancer type issues that are more pressing. So it frees up capacity in that way. And also there's a cost saving there. So a patient going to see a GP at £30 a session compared to the cost of physio now for an MSK related issue, there's a huge saving there. For each patient in the pilot in Wales, there's the potential to regenerate 76% in terms of money in that regard. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but basically this just shows you that the pathways at Haldal, Comtaf and in our services and some of the time that can be generated by introducing physio now and removing the triage that those services automatically have in their system, and how that then can generate into more benefits. An average health service in Wales will have around 20,000 referrals per year. So if we include that, we take out the triage component because physio now will do that, use the self-referral component and then add in self-management. There's the potential that if you just go middle of the road there on the column on the right to generate around £250,000 per health board. So if you roll that out across Wales, there's the potential to save over £1 million by just introducing a simple device like physio now. And that benefit can then be realised in a number of ways. It can help reduce waiting lists, it can help improve staff training so that the patients are getting a better journey, a better evidence-based care. It can help with any recruitment pressures, and it also can develop and expand services and make them a little bit better as well. And just want to sort of draw to a close here, speak a little bit about some future developments that we're working on with physio now, because the technology is just constantly evolving. And the major one for us is a self-management component, whereas patients would receive a suite of exercises and interaction with a physiotherapist and not need to enter the service at all. And that just frees up more capacity within the service and empowers the patient. There's lots of benefits with that. And also increasing the AI component of it, so it is more an interactional experience rather than just going through the algorithms. And both those components are in extensive testing at the minute and are ready for deployment imminently. And we feel that those will really revolutionise physio and take it to that next step. And we hope to continue our work in Wales in the near future. Just some wider engagement that we've been involved in. So and the main sort of one on this page would be the Lebanon exemplars. We're part of the fast track cohort on that as well. So hopefully just spread more of the good work that Physio and I can do. And those are my details, which I'm hoping have been popped up in the chat as well. But if you do have any more queries, please just get in touch with us to discuss the pilot or Physio and I.
Gary, and yes, your contact details have popped up in the chat. So this is now the opportunity for people to ask questions of our panel. But I'm going to take the luxury of being chair and ask the first question to our panel. So we've heard this morning from yourselves and Ivan and others about how things have been able to be done differently and quicker because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's been able to provide opportunities. What difficulties did you find in the activity over the last 12 months that were caused by the COVID pandemic? Was it all easier, or were there some barriers and challenges that the pandemic threw up, particularly if the sort of not obvious ones? I can see everybody's thinking very hard, so I'm going to have to pick on someone. I'm going to pick on Stefan.
I can start if you like.
Oh, Gary, to kick off then.
I guess a major problem for us was the redeployment of staff, physiotherapists within pathways. So a lot of physiotherapists were then redeployed to support ICU or to support COVID units, and that left once you completed physio and that next step, there was sometimes a little bit of a gap between that. Because priority came with dealing with the COVID response. So, but we find that started to ease now as things have started to improve. But that would have been our major barrier at the outset.
Stefan, what challenges did you face?
I think it was just getting patients to find out about the app, because obviously they're not visiting surgeries now at the moment. So we had pop-up banners, we had posters, we had QR codes on reception areas to tell patients surgeries had the app. But now that they're not going to surgery quite so much, they're having to be triaged before coming down, and only patients with appointments were having it, were going to the surgery. It was difficult then, but we have we've got a lot of social media for practices. We've got a lot of stuff that practices can send out by text. So once they do have the app, then patient feedback has been great, really. And interestingly, we've got a demographic sort of much the same as Gary. We've got a demographic sort of tool built into the dashboard, and a lot of elderly patients. We found that a lot more prevalence of 50+ patients who were downloading the app and accessing those services. But particularly once we got over that hurdle of letting patients know, then it was. But that was the biggest problem, of just communicating the fact that it is available now. And yeah,
one of the things from my perspective, which we've been reflecting on the last kind of couple of weeks, is that suddenly, normally when you're building products and kind of putting it into the healthcare system, you spend a lot of time watching that thing being used kind of in real life. We went live in March 2020, so I have never seen Concentric used kind of face-to-face, like in real life being used, which like definitely poses like lots of product challenges. So you really have to lean into having lots of conversations with clinicians, like really doubling down in terms of patient feedback to sort of understand what's working, what the niggles are, what's kind of, what are those things that if you were just, there in a room silently kind of watching it being used, you would kind of very easily pick up. So I think, the challenge for us has been kind of having to do much, you always want to be hearing as much as you can from patients and clinicians, but often you can fast track that to a certain extent just by kind of watching the process. Whereas last year we haven't had that luxury, so we've had to be like, we need to like extract as much information as possible from any other sources about what's working, what's not working, like where our priority should be, because we just haven't been able to be there just silently watching in a hospital as you otherwise would be.
Now, that's an aspect I hadn't really thought about, and does bring all of those challenges. But we've also heard about how things have been easier to do and roll out and agree. Do you think some of that sort of culture change and will stay in the work that you're doing with health boards and organisations, or do you think we're going to go back to that sort of traditionally very difficult development journey?
everyone's forgotten how they used to do things before March 2020. It would be harder for people to go back to the way they were than to stick with a new way. If it was a 3-month pandemic and then it came and went, that would happen. But this is, well over, it's over 12 months. People don't remember what they were doing in February 2020.
Gary, have you had similar experience?
Yeah, I think so. I tend to agree. All you hear talk about now is more blended working, even just thinking of our own lives in terms of people coming into offices and stuff like that. So I think there'll be a lot less travel, and I think there'll be a lot more interaction with digital technology. It's the way forward, and it's the way it's just going to be, I think. And it's probably for the betterment of everybody. So yeah, let's go.
And Stefan, from a primary care perspective, there is, I think, more expectations that things might snap back to the way they were. Are you seeing that in primary care?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've had feedback from if you think about it, everything that comes into a GP surgery goes through the hands of a receptionist, doesn't it? If it's a phone call or a request for a medication or admin request on reception, the feedback we've had now is that the primary care is far better equipped to manage requests coming into practice if it's brought in digitally. Certainly with an audit trail, if a patient phones or does something over the counter, there's no real digital audit trail. But if it comes in digitally to the practice, they can manage that. They can import it into their workflow in the back office, sort of thing. And then there's an audit trail of what's coming in. We had one patient give feedback to one of the practices in Cardiff that he was, for the first time ever, he was able to digitally send his GP surgery his remote ECG reading without having to catch a taxi from home to get to the surgery to give that reading, so he was able to submit that through the app to the GP, and the GP was able to get back to him and read that and interpret that on his system. So I don't think we'll ever go back. The appetite is there for patients. The appetite is certainly there for practices, because they're so they're put down, if you like, but by the fact that the patients aren't able to get through to them by phone. But if there's a different option, and certainly if I was to make a request for if my son, he was referred to ENT a few months ago. We hadn't heard from ENT about the referral. I was able to send the request through the app to my GP to say, look, can somebody chase a referral? I didn't have to phone the surgery with that. I just sent it on my phone at 9 o'clock at night. So it just helps primary care to sort of better manage their workflow, and hopefully patients with real clinical need urgently can get through far quicker to primary care. So I can't see us going back now. Hopefully we don't.
We've talked about how a sort of disruptive in a positive and negative way the last 12 months has been, and it's how it's affected all of your businesses. What do you think has been the number one lesson that you've taken away from the last 12 months? I don't know if you want to kick off, Stefan.
Yeah, I think it's managing expectation. There are so many digital opens up so many avenues to new innovations. For example, our app only launched in November, and already we've had a fifth of all GP practices take it up. But the feedback from patients is they want more. They want more functionality, and I think we have to manage expectations. To okay, well, we can do it, but let's do it at a step change. Let's not just do everything overnight, because again, you don't want to leave anybody behind or exclude people. So I think it's introducing services slowly, building up, and educating patients on that, taking them on that journey, because it is a journey of change. So I think it's not just an overnight step change and expecting patients to sort of just go along with it. We have to educate patients and help them along the process. So I think that's what we're trying to do, is just introduce services more and more, but at a time, where it's the right time to introduce that service.
Fantastic. David, what's your key takeaway from this last 12 months?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd probably come up with a different answer if I had some time to think about it. And so just the thing that comes to my mind is that, we saw different organizations dealing with things in quite different ways. So, we've heard about some where, organizations became, very clinician led, clinicians given a lot of flexibility to kind of introduce what they kind of wanted and needed. Others that, it was more the kind of administrative processes that accelerated, but it was still being kind of driven by the same processes or same decision makers. And it probably took us a little bit of time to kind of work out kind of where we fit and where we wanted to sit in that kind of spectrum. And in a time of huge flux and huge change, it's the kind of old adage of being agile and flexible, but you need to be agile and flexible anyway. But when you've got organizations that are also like suddenly changing very rapidly, it definitely kind of brings that to the forefront. So we took very different approaches for every NHS trust. So I don't think I could write a process map of our deployments over the last 12 months, because they've all been completely different, and you've just got to kind of embrace that and run with it, and at some point during the next 12 months kind of consolidate that and go, okay, things are settling down a little bit, what kind of should that look like going forward, or and how standardized does that need to be, how flexible does it need to be, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, bit of a whirlwind.
And Gary?
I think for us, the main thing would be the need to keep pathways open, especially for those conditions deemed as non-urgent. If you've got a bad back and COVID switches off supply things, and you're sitting around for 6 to 12 months, believe me, your bad back's not going to get any better. So by having a pathway that keeps things open, and using technologies such as Physio Now and online services, you can sort of alleviate and manage those conditions, because a patient who's left to sort of fester, for want of a better word, with their condition is only going to take more input when this all ends. And we're just building on waiting lists, but by shutting down pathways. So I would like to see pathways staying open as much as possible.
And probably my final question for this session, if you could ask for one thing to make things easier for you to engage with the NHS, what would that be?
Shall I go first?
Go for it, Stefan.
Actually, the NHS is doing a lot to engage, and it's quite refreshing. The whole point of building the app for us was based on what patients wanted. They wanted one point of access. They didn't want to have an app for this or not different apps for this. They wanted everything in one place, and it's been quite refreshing to see APIs being opened up. I mean, we've built a sort of one-stop shop patient interface where they can go to our app and then be sent to different places. So we integrate quite heavily with DEWIS for voluntary services. We integrate with quite heavily for my Health Online for online repeats. But everything's one place. But it's nice to see the NHS opening up. It would be nice to partner with some of these guys. But when I was in a PM, we did an audit. 11% of all GP consultations are MSK related. So if we can take 11% of GP consultations away to the Physio Now service, where patients can get that resource. And if we built that into the app, so they can just not phone the GP for that. There's a step, and they can recognize I don't need to phone the GP for my bad back. I can use this resource and self-refer. But it's nice that we are able to open up now, and there's lots of APIs coming out from NHS Wales and NHS Digital in England, NHS X, which does so. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're bringing services and working together and collaborating a lot more to sort of help patients at the coalface sort of thing. That's what I've found that quite refreshing, actually.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, because I think I'd say something very similar in terms of there's core building blocks that we've talked about, and Stefan, you've talked about NHS login and those core things that we all don't need to be building, and so there's definitely a focus both in England and in Wales on those core infrastructure things, and it's just about getting particularly with a Welsh hat on, getting some of those APIs through the ecosystem team into production, so that people like us can just say, yep, I no longer need to worry about demographics in Wales. There's a Fire API that I can plug and play into it, as long as we're authenticated appropriately into it. That just opens up the ecosystem. It means that core systems, the NHS, NWS or Digital Health and Care Wales can focus on those kind of things that they need to focus on, and then those that are delivering much more niche products in many ways, but delivering those really well can add a huge amount of value to patients all the way along that process. So focus on those core infrastructure bits and let's get those into production.
I agree.
Finally, Gary, what would your ask be?
What the two chaps just said, really. They couldn't have summed it up any better. I think just not that temptation to revert back to how things were. The NHS has embraced new technology at a speed probably not known to it before in terms of getting people remotely working. So I would just like to see that continue and to continue integration. We work a lot with trusts and partner with them. So it's continuing that integration with the independent sector to help make pathways that a little bit more efficient, but saying can generate and benefit the patient, the clinicians and staff within that, and ultimately the system that pays for it. So that would be my big ask.
Well, thank you all for your time and presentations this morning and stories. I mean, just huge amounts of excitement, and progress over the last 12 months. And thank you for giving us that insight and information. I know the audience have really enjoyed that. So it just sort of to sum up, now that we are finishing this session, we're going to have a break for another 15 minutes, and then we have the final session for MediWales Connects, where we're going to hear about the National Data Resource, which is the flagship programme, which is going to transform how we use data in health and social care across Wales. So please go and refresh yourselves over the next 15 minutes, and we will be back here for 12:15. Thank you. You that have been here for 4 days, I imagine you're quite pleased towards the end, but hopefully we're going to finish with one of the best sessions of the conference. I was very keen. The last session focused on the National Data Resource. This is the national programme which will fundamentally transform how we will be able to use and analyse data in health and care. It really is the future and offers huge opportunities for patients and clinicians to be able to make better informed decisions. I'm very excited about the potential that the NDR offers, and to explain a bit more in detail and to talk through the ambitions, progress and plans is Paul Howells, Programme Lead for the National Data Resource, and Chris Haberley, Senior Project Manager for National Data Resource and the Advanced Analytics Group. So I will hand over to Paul and Chris and all things NDR.
Hi, Helen. Hello, just testing. You can hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear and see you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Helen. Set me up nicely there. No pressure. So I'm just going to show the slides.
Yep, that's great. We can see that.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm Paul. I'm the Programme Lead for the National Data Resource. I currently work for Digital Health and Care Wales as of today, and I've been setting up the National Data Resource Programme for the past few years, including building quite a large team that's spread across each of the health boards and trusts, and now into Social Care Wales starting this year as well. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the programme is, who we are, what we're aiming to deliver. A brief history, not too long on that, where we've been, the journey we've been on over the past few years, and the structure of our programme, and the difference we're intending to make, and our vision. I'm going to touch on some of our design principles and around some of the technical themes. So there is a reasonable amount of technical depth in here, but it's important to try and get across the complexity of the programme. So we'll talk you through some of the technical aspects that we're building across the platform. And then next steps, really, and I'll hand over to Chris at the end. Chris works with me on the programme. Chris looks after the Advanced Analytics Group, which is a critical project within the programme. So 3 key things we're leading on. We are leading some of the key components and the recommendations of the Digital Architecture Review, which is roughly 18 months old. That's very much in partnership with Digital Health and Care Wales and each of the organisations, the health boards and other partners. But the NDR, the National Data Resource Programme, is delivering some core architectural building blocks associated with those recommendations. Because without doing that, it's difficult to deliver a lot of our key objectives about how we share and use data across the system. Ultimately, by doing that, then that leads on to number 2, which will allow us to more easily and more efficiently provide secure access to data in a timed way to appropriate users. At the moment, we can do that, but it's very much restricted and constrained in data silos, for example. And there's a lot of data standardization work that needs to happen before we're able to share data in the more efficient way that we want to. And ultimately, then by doing that, we enable a much better connected digital health and care record. So the challenges identified at a top level from the digital architecture review were we need to improve our technology, our integration, the way our systems, our applications, and our data integrates across the platform of NHS digital services in Wales. Try and move away from less centrally led projects and make sure we do that in a more federated way, which is the ethos of our programme, and improve our infrastructure and ultimately modernise what we're doing. So how we will do this, we've structured the NDR programme, phase 2 of the programme. I'll talk a little bit about phase 1 in a second, around 4 key themes, 4 technical areas really, but move into a more open digital architecture, which I guess maybe a good way of trying to understand that is if you think about open banking, for example, where you can connect, well, I can do it on my phone, for example, I can connect to Santander, which is my main bank, but I can also bring in a bank account I have with Halifax into that same app, for example, and that's set up through a series of APIs. But every time I ask that app to call the data from Halifax, it calls it for me, and the information you see is completely consistent, name, address, and so on and so forth. And that's all agreed based on technical standards. The consumer of that data, me in that instance, has given authority through authentication in an app to happen. So that's an example, I guess, of a more open digital architecture. At the moment, that sort of data translation across systems and applications across the NHS is difficult. A lot of that requires standards about how you share the data, so ensure systems and applications use the same technical standards. A lot of them being organically grown over the years, and they don't communicate efficiently with each other, which requires a lot of manual intervention to share data. I touched on this already, but making sure we don't necessarily hold all data in one place, so we consume data from where it's held, but we're able to do that more efficiently. That's more of a federated data exchange. So we're not shifting large swathes of data around the system every time we want to use data. We call it and use it when we need it. And ultimately, by enabling 1, 2, and 3, we then provide, again, better access for data for insights, analytics, and applications. So a little bit more meat on the bones, some of the recommendations from the digital architecture. You can see there we've done a mapping exercise from the recommendations in the digital architecture view, DA1 through to SA1 on the left-hand side. And we've mapped that to the 4 technical themes that underpin the National Data Resource Programme to ensure we're addressing each of those recommendations through that. So you can see a lot of it is around design principles, standards, defining the architectural building blocks. And then if you open up each one of those boxes, there's much more technical meat on the bone there about how we're going to do that. Okay, so a little bit of history. As I said, I'll cover a little bit of brief history of where we've come from. So the NDR, or the National Data Resource, was first mentioned in a statement of intent quite a few years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago. There was a brief statement in there about how we want to establish a national data resource, plus some other associated priorities, such as how we improve information governance, for example, and how we improve capacity and capability and skills associated with that, and how we improve information quality and data quality. Those are all interlinked objectives as part of the statement of intent. At that time, it was a sort of idea, I guess. Arguably, the idea's been around for quite a long time, to be honest, but it's the first time it's been mentioned, I guess, in that sort of form. And then it moved into a Healthier Wales, where it was also mentioned about the NDR needs to be formed, effectively, as was said in Healthier Wales, to allow large-scale data to be shared around the system more efficiently. That's pretty much what it said. So I was brought in at that point in time, a few years ago, as programme lead to sort of take those statements and turn them into some form of reality. So we did a lot of engagement requirements gathering. We had a steering group set up, which had some senior stakeholders from the health boards and MWIS and local and Welsh Government. And that ultimately led to a business case where we submitted roughly 2 years ago, 18 months ago, that set out a strategic 10-year programme. That was in the advice of Welsh Government, that we wanted to signal a long-term commitment to improve the national architecture and the way data flows around the system. So it's not just, for example, creating a new data warehouse that's a bit more modern and using that, which, that's a project that could be done quite quickly, I would say. This is very much a long-term ambition that continually improves the way data flows around the system across the whole of health and care. So the programme was established on the back of that. Funding was agreed. We stood up the team this year. We've now got a team of about 40 in place, which we built over the past year. That's been a big challenge with COVID. A lot of the staff have been mobilised into COVID activities. So it has set us back a little bit in phase 1, in all honesty, but we're looking to recoup that now in phase 2. Despite some of those setbacks in phase 1, actually, we've learned a lot from actually rapid use of data to inform COVID, and the NDR team has been involved heavily in that. And we, for example, the team has been setting up the test, track and protect system and things like that, which has allowed us to accelerate the way data flows across health and social care. And we've just finished phase 1 delivery, moving into phase 2 now, which I'll talk a little bit about shortly. So in terms of the difference we will make, there's a broad categorization of people we will help there. You could debate some of those categories, but broadly, I think they're in the right ballpark. So obviously for the citizen and patient, that's what it's all about, the use of the health and care service. And as we move into a much more digital age, then citizens and patients want to take much more personal control of their data, and can do that through digital services now, such as on the phone. And to do that, we need to improve the way data is accessible. And obviously, other benefits for staff across health and care, senior managers and planners want to be able to plan better. To do that, they need better data. Care professionals need data when they're needed to inform decisions, both operationally and on a research basis. And the same with operational staff, the same with analysts and researchers who may want to look at data in less real time, shall we say, for research projects or for creating a dashboard that is used for analytical purposes or for data science purposes. And then developers, really, which is an important part of what we do. They just ultimately want to modernize the way they're able to share, to create the platform of data sharing efficiencies, such as APIs, which is an important way that we share data in more real time. So our vision is to do that based on a more modern open platform, as I've said. Local implementations based on standards. So standards are the heart of what we're doing. People are also the heart of what we're doing. The technology aspect of this is arguably, I wouldn't say straightforward, but it's something that is achievable. I think the hardest bit is bringing people along for the ride, to be honest, because there's a lot of legacy infrastructure, a lot of legacy ways of working that we need to try and change as we go. And very much a shared and collaborative resourcing model. So most of those staff, or a lot of those staff, are based across the health boards and the trusts, and more in social care as we speak, to work collaboratively with the programme team who wants to implement any. And some of our design principles, just to call out a few of the key ones, really, very much a user-centered approach of trying to work with users as much as we can. Despite some of the complexity of what we're doing, a lot of what we've done in phase 1 and we'll continue into phase 2 is very much the technical aspects, the stuff that goes unseen, is under the bonnet, but will ultimately enable the stuff above the bonnet in due course to be easier. But we're still trying to bring along the users for that ride. A flexible platform built on agile way of design and a modular design, and so on and so forth. So the timeline, I sort of touched on this already. We're in the middle bit, just moved from the December 2020 end of phase 1, and moving into phase 2 now. We've got a lot of alpha and beta products developed in phase 1. So we've got a new alpha national data store in place in the cloud, and a range of other services that ultimately need scaling up to more enterprise scale across the system in phase 2. A little bit more detail on the 4 themes. So you'll see some enabling work there. API management is key. And the national terminology service is key. That's a much more real-time way of capturing data that works with clinicians based on clinical terminology it's agreed. So the standardization is up front in the systems. It's quite a technical work stream. And then I won't talk too much more about this slide. I think I'll cover a bit later, and Chris will talk about number 4, which is the stuff we're doing with the analytics, the insights, and using the data more efficiently as well. Just a little snapshot, really. There's a lot of work, as I said, in phase 1 that's gone on with the bonnet. You can see a snapshot of some of the technical architecture that we're building there on screen. But it's important to note, I guess, that we do have a relatively well-connected national architecture in Wales. We're one of the only countries, I guess, on a national basis who's able to share and access results, diagnostics on a national level in any care setting, which is quite unique as a nation. So we're looking to build on that existing connectivity, make it more modern and make it more open, that people can tap into that and we can use the data from that more efficiently. A little bit of insight into some of the technologies we're either implementing or exploring. Some of these are in pilot stage. Some of them are being implemented at scale already, just to give you a snapshot of some of the suppliers we're working with as well. So phase 2, talked a little bit about the history, some of the journey we've been on so far, and some of the things we've been doing in phase 1. Phase 2 now, as I said, is all about scaling up. So we're looking to scale up our alpha version of the cloud-based national data store to include more openly and based on and the data set you see in the first bullet there, GP data, community data, data, could go on, theatres, ambulance, 111. A lot of that is still subject to information governance, which is, I'll come on to that in a second. But also making sure we do that data flows into the national data store in a standardized way, based on consistent terminology. That's the important bit. That data already exists in some forms across a lot of the information services teams at the moment, for example, across the health boards and MWIS. But it's not necessarily standardized, or it's standardized to an extent, but we're trying to directly source data in more real-time clinical systems as well. So that's the journey we need to go through for that data store. We will still ultimately use that data for secondary uses purposes, such as analytics and research and so on. So there may be still some grouping of data, for example, but we're looking to acquire data in more real-time clinical and operational systems. I've spoken about a lot of the other stuff there. I won't talk too much length about that. We've also maybe call it a couple more around the secure e-research and data collaboration platform. That's something we've built in phase 1, or we've purchased a tenancy with. We purchased a. I'm losing my screen. We purchased a tenancy in partnership with Swansea University, which is sits alongside the Sale Data Bank, and we've got a national data resource tenancy set alongside that. And we're already establishing some research projects within that environment. That's in partnership with the health boards and the MWIS information services team. We're also running some pilot work, looking to scale up in phase 2 around with Welsh Ambulance Service about, for example, using a messaging service called Kafka, which allows ambulance data to be shared and streamed in near real time into ED departments, for example, which will improve the way patients are dealt with in ED settings, and will give ED settings a heads up in terms of the flow of ambulance patients arriving in more real time than is currently available. So that's an exemplar project that we're looking to work on. We've also done some work in phase 1 about the single cancer data platform. I'll play a little video on that shortly. We're looking to scale it up now and acquire and inform that sort of dependent program by providing data to that program in much more real time than is currently done. We're also working more and more with Social Care Wales. You may have seen a strategic approach to data for social care document published recently that was published in partnership between the National Data Resource and Social Care Wales and local authorities. There were a lot of workshops going into that. That's a really good bit of work, and there was a series of actions and quick wins and a roadmap that we're working on as next steps. We're also working on in phase 2, and we've started in phase 1, a risk stratification data platform. So we've accelerated this recently with the Q-COVID algorithm, which we've implemented in the National Data Resource, in the National Data Store in partnership with the existing information services infrastructure in MWIS. So we've been able to test that out, and I'm now looking to scale that up with other risk stratification work that's happening across health and care, such as the population health and segmentation work that's happening at Prehab initially, and we'll be looking to support that work in phase 2. Okay, so some critical dependencies, quite a detailed slide, don't need to worry too much about the stuff on the right, but it's just important to call out some of these dependencies, I think, in terms of the sort of the real critical things that need to happen to support our program. We need improvements to the way our governance, our information governance, the way data flows around the system to be made, and that's underway. The establishment of a special health authority will help that. And also there's work on a data promise being led by the Welsh Government as well. Other things to call out there, it's important really that we engage as far as wide as possible with the clinical networks, with wider teams that we have dependencies on, such as the MWIS or DHEW teams and services, where we will we have a heavy reliance on infrastructure with commercial services, with security, integration, and so on and so forth. So we're putting a lot of effort into that at the moment. It's been challenging because of COVID over the past year, so we're a little bit behind with that stuff, but we're looking to recoup that in phase 2. So I'll play a little video now just to try and bring some of that to life, I guess. I appreciate it was some technical content there, and hopefully this video helps bring some of it to life around the work we've done in partnership with the cancer leads on the single cancer pathway program.
I'm not sure that's
National Data Resource Program. The Single Cancer Pathway is an ambitious initiative designed to ensure patients are diagnosed and treated sooner, with support at every stage. Let's explore how the NDR data might support these initiatives now and in the future. SERA is a primary school.
Sorry, Paul, I think we're having some technical difficulties there.
Sorry?
I think we're having technical difficulties. We can only hear the video, we can't see it.
Ah, right. Okay, apologies. About 3 seconds in.
What we can do is put a link to that video in the chat. That might be an easier way to do that, so people can look at the video at their own leisure. So apologies for that. You carry on, Paul. I'll put the link in the chat.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Never mind. It's a nice video. Okay, so yeah, moving on to next steps. I'm probably a bit tight on time anyway, so it's probably. Yeah, so just to get across, I guess, in summary, that the NDRs, as Helen's already said, really a key strategic objective of Welsh Health and Care. It goes some way to delivering a lot of the recommendations of the digital architecture, which will modernise the way data flows around the system. It's a highly complex program, as I've hopefully gotten across. It's not as simple as just creating maybe some nice, shiny new data warehouses with some dashboards on top of it. That would be a project, and it would be easy-ish. It's very much, as I said, around the way that the data flows around the digital architecture, which is highly complex and technical. So please continue to engage with us. That's the purpose of these presentations, really, is to keep the communications widely open. We're always available for contact, and everybody's input is critical, really. And thank you very much. I'll hand over to Chris.
Thanks, Paul. Oh, where have you all gone? There you are. Hopefully you can all hear me now. Hi, I'm Chris, and I run the Advanced Analytics group. I think I'm still seeing Paul, so hopefully you can see me as well as hear me. So Paul's been talking about the National Data Resource, and I run the Advanced Analytics group, which sits under the National Data Resource. So whilst the National Data Resource is creating a fantastic bucket full of data, I've been working with people who are interested in doing stuff with that data. So I'm just going to share my screen. If you can bear with me a moment. I'm hoping you can now see that. Well,
yes, we can see that, Chris.
Well, thank you very much. We had enough technical issues. We all love live demonstrations, don't we? So I run the Advanced Analytics Group. In the Advanced Analytics Group, we've got members from all walks of life, whether that be academia, clinicians, and of course the clever analysts. So we've got, like I mentioned, we've got the senior management, got clinicians, we've got academics, and then we have the data scientists and data analysts and information analysts all working together to see what we can do to collaborate. So rather than having somebody in North Wales working on a set project and someone in South Wales working on a similar project without knowing about it, hopefully we can all club together and do something in a more collaborative manner. So the first step of running this group is to put together 5 working groups. After learning of all the different projects going on around Wales in the area of advanced analytics, I realised there were similarities amongst lots of these different projects, and I thought it would be useful to try and get these people with specialisms in set areas in a room together, virtually of course, to see what we could achieve. And the first step of that was to create these working groups. And some of you may or may not recognise those names, but the chairs of each of these groups are all quite significant in those specific areas. And the 5 themes that we have a group for each of them. The first one is natural language processing. The idea of this is to be able to throw in a file with a whole bunch of consultants' letters in there, and the machine will know everything about those letters. It'll read them, it'll know who the patients are, who the doctor is, when various scans were done, what the results were, that kind of stuff. And it's those sorts of projects that we'll be looking at under NLP. Secondly is chatbots. You might have seen on Facebook and across the news, there are various COVID chatbots in use at the moment, where either as a patient or just as a member of the public, you might say, hey, I've got a sore throat and I've got this cough that won't go away. And it'll come back and say, hey, you've got coronavirus, you need to have a chat with your doctor, and so forth. Advanced image analysis. The idea of this is to have the images from your x-rays and your radiology images popping into a machine. It'll come out and it'll say, yes, this one's abnormal. It looks like it's got such and such issue with it. That's the idea of image analysis. I am paraphrasing here and simplifying things for the purpose of demonstrating what these descriptions mean. Number 4 there is population health and behaviours. So there's lots of projects going on understanding what the state of the nation's health. And this is to look at projects which are related to that kind of theme. But as you mentioned, as you can see there, it's population health and behaviours. It's not just looking at our health data and working out that we have people in a particular part of Wales suffering from a particular disease or a particular ailment. It's looking at the behaviours as well. And as you can see there, the chair of this group is Dr. Louisa Nolan, and she's the chief data scientist for the ONS. And the reason that she's been selected and thankfully accepted as being the chair of that area is that she's got access to and she's got knowledge of lots and lots of other types of data. So you might realise, for example, that people in Swansea of a certain shape and size might suffer with diabetes-related issues. By accessing contextual data, which may not be obviously connected or related to health, we can learn more about that situation. For example, we could find out what kind of houses do these people live in, and where have they been on holiday, what jobs do they have, what education do they have, and try and find out the true cause of certain groups of people having different ailments and predicting what might happen. Which brings me on to prediction and planning. Of course, we've got lots of very clever people creating charts and predicting what's going to be happening in the future using using artificial intelligence and machine learning and all that other kind of fancy stuff. But then we have people in board meetings at a very senior level making decisions on where to spend the money over the next 5 or 10 years. And wouldn't it be great to link the two? Because we know at the moment that you might have somebody who's relatively junior create an amazing piece of work and really show in stats what's about to happen, but getting that message across to the people who are making the decisions can be a bit of a challenge. So the idea here is to have projects which can not only predict what's going to happen in the future, but help influence the planning at a strategic level from that. So we've got 5 thematic working groups for the Advanced Analytics Group, and in each of those 5 groups we've got anything between 10 and 20 members. And the idea of these 10 or 20 members is to select a specific project or two, go and find maybe a senior clinical sponsor of that project, and then work together. So there might be professors from the university, there might be research PhD students, and there'll be analysts from various health boards across Wales or social services, and then they'll all work together in order to come up with a solution which we can then roll out nationally. That's the idea, and identify what these challenges might be. You can see at the bottom there, there's 2 other blue squares or blue rectangles. Analytics tools, first of all. You can imagine that in these discussions, we're talking about collaborating and people working together on a particular piece of data, on a particular project. So you might have somebody in a health board in West Wales saying, hey, I'm doing something, I'm using this Python programming language to do this clever machine learning stuff. And we might then have somebody from social services in South Wales, in Bridgend, for example, saying, I want to work on that as well. Can I help? Let's work together. But as you might imagine, if you work for a big organization, your PCs are going to be locked down, your procurement departments might not want to buy the right stuff for you. It's all going to get very complicated. So through these analytics tools, the idea is to come up with a proposal and hopefully a solution where we can create a platform to work together, to collaborate, a cloud platform where there's a repository for our programming code where you can remotely dip into and work with other people. And lastly, there is analytics capability, which I'll bring me on to my next slide. Looking at the analytic capability, this is a topic which seems to be gaining some momentum. So whilst I've been working with the analysts and with the academics and clinicians, something that I've been learning is that we're not really sure what capability we have at the moment, and we've had various significant projects to look at our staffing, look at their skills, but then we might find out that in one part of Wales or in one organisation we've got somebody called a data scientist. Then another part of a similar organisation we've got somebody called an information or business information analyst. But they might be doing very similar things but with different job titles, but we don't really know what their levels are. Can they program in Python? Can they program in R? Do they know how to use Power BI? All this technical stuff. So the idea of this group is to understand what we have at the moment and work out how we can upskill our staff at the moment, and how we can recruit staff in the future and provide them with the correct CPD opportunities, but also come up with some kind of competency framework. So if you do start as a junior analyst or data scientist, there is a clear path on what you need to do to achieve a more senior level, should you wish to do that. Just like it at the moment, if you're an academic or if you're a doctor, there's a set route. There's a set route from being a junior doctor to being a consultant and through a registrar, etc., etc. It's working out some kind of pathway for our analysts and helping other people understand how that works. That's why we've got the mention of senior management there. And so to wrap up, the Advanced Analytics Group is to hopefully use the fantastic big bucket full of data that the NDR has created and get lots of clever people from various different organisations across Wales, and not just in Wales, but across the nation, to work together collaboratively and share their efforts to come up with some solutions to really make a difference to our clinicians and ultimately the patients. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Paul, for that rapid run through of what is clearly very significant programmes and pieces of work. So the first questions come in from Gwyn. It's talking about an online event platform where NHS, industry and academia can join in without security issues. Could this be a role for the NDR? So for those of you who haven't experienced this, there is a challenge with NHS having teams in a different instance. And so, for example, ourselves at the Hub, we have trouble. We can't use Microsoft Teams live platform. It's a technical thing, but actually a real barrier to collaboration. So is this a potential role for the NDR? Or for the NDR to be able to fix?
Could I answer that? It is.
Free.
It's something that we can certainly help with, and it's part of the work that I was talking about, having an analytical platform for us to share and collaborate with. So we've got Microsoft on board to try and help us. Not that they'll be providing a final solution, they might not, but they're experts in this kind of field, and they've been looking at things such as all Wales tenancies for the Welsh government. They've been looking at those kind of opportunities which would help this kind of thing happen. But it's definitely recognised that we do have some governance issues. There's also what we are sharing. Are we going to be sharing the patient's personal data? Do we need to right now? Or will we be sharing code which can be used to analyze data? But there's two different angles of this. So we do need to sort out the information governance, and there's a massive piece of work going on for us to understand what needs to be done there. And we do have external help with that. There's also, in the meantime, working out how we can collaborate more immediately, but without using that personally identifiable information. So there were 2 steps to it. And yes, we're working on both.
So another question from me. So there's been a huge amount of underpinning work done around national data resource over the past, sort of year and a bit, and there's a lot still to do. When will clinicians and patients really start seeing the impact of the NDR? Paul might have a better idea on that one.
Yeah, well, I like to think they're seeing aspects of that currently. We've been supporting the COVID effort, for example, quite significantly. Our team has been supporting that, and some of the technical work around that, building the COVID TTP system, building the data hub, building the Welsh immunisation system in partnership with NWIS and other colleagues. So obviously there's an impact there. I think a lot of the from a patient perspective, we're working in partnership with the Digital Services and Patients and Public programme. We have a work plan to enable the data requirements of that programme over the next year. So over the next year to 18 months, maybe 2 years, depending on aspects of that programme and the scaling up of it. So we will provide effectively the data that feeds the patient portal and the patient application services that patients will interact with, and that will be within the next 12 to 18 months. Also, from a clinical perspective, there's lots of projects going on. We're working with clinicians already, the single cancer pathway being one. The cardiac network is where we're looking to improve the way data flows in more real time by providing clinicians an application where they directly input their data that feeds the NICOR registry and then the analytics from that. That is in progress. Within about a year, the current plan assumes we will have that service up and running in at least pilot phase, and then the following year we'll be at scale across the cardiac network. Probably needs more investment at that point in time if we're going at scale. So I could go on. There's a series of other examples where we're working with clinicians. So it's very much, there's not a big bang here. It's incremental. It's project by project, working with clinicians, working with other programs, etc.
That's fantastic. And so based on the experience of the last year, sort of what's the biggest lesson as you've gone through phase 1 that you're taking into phase 2?
Biggest lesson. Don't have a global pandemic would be helpful. Set up a program. Good. I think arguably before the year before we set up the program, I think there was too much focus on the technical needs of the program before we had engaged widely enough. So it was based on a lot of data, information, digital people on what they think needs to happen. I think, which is obviously still very important, but I think we focused too much on solutionizing it before we'd set up the program. I think we should have, we're now catching up a little bit with engagement. I think it should have been the other way around.
Chris, you've had the experience of talking to everybody about what we need to do around analytics. What's that sort of key lesson that's come out for you over the past few months?
I think it's more that I've learned an awful lot about how people want to collaborate, but they haven't had the right opportunity to. There are various different groups out there which are working in specific areas and doing fantastic jobs in those specific areas. But I've learned that when I pull into the same room, a professor from Cardiff University and a professor from Swansea University and a manager from a health board in North Wales and a clever data analyst from a health board in South Wales, and put them all in the same virtual room, they're surprisingly eager to work with one another. And I've learned that Wales is in a unique position to do just that. So brought into the group, we've also got the Office of National Statistics and several colleagues from NHS. And they're terribly envious of us. Whenever they try to run out collaborative projects in England, somebody from one health trust doesn't know anybody in another health trust, and they don't really want to know somebody in another health trust. These situations can occur. I'm not saying it's rampant, but there's a lot of examples like that where they're struggling to get people to collaborate because their health boards are so vast and so different. However, in Wales, we all like to know our neighbours, don't we? I used to live in London, and I lived in London for 8 years, and I had no idea of the first name of the person who lived next door. However, here in Wales, everybody knows everybody, and it's that kind of way of living and way of working that has really helped this, and we're all super excited to work with one another, and it's been a pleasant lesson to learn.
As a final question for both of you, what's the biggest challenge facing you in the next 6 to 12 months? Chris, do you want to kick off?
I think from my point of view, I've got lots of people wanting to do stuff with data, and we know the data technically is there, and we have access to it thanks to the efforts of the National Data Resource, but we're just having a few difficulties using that data and getting the sign-off to use that data, and we've got some significant pieces of work to do over the next 6 to 12 months to ensure that that's a fluid process and that we do have options.
And Paul?
Yeah, from my perspective, I was still going to say what Chris is going to say. It's definitely around ensuring we have the right legal basis for data to be used in the way we intended to be used through the National Data Resource and the information governance. Complexity around that is challenging, but there's a large project in the way to try and solve that. The next 6 to 12 months for us is all getting away from it is the ongoing impact of COVID on the resources and the availability of dependent resources that we need to help us with the programme. That's the biggest challenge for us. So we're working with wider GHEW colleagues to put significant effort into bringing in additional people into the system to relieve that pressure, and also working with suppliers as best as possible through the frameworks we have to bring in additional resources associated with some of the projects.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I get to wrap up this session. And I just want to start by thanking both of you for that fascinating presentation, and that real insight into what the future looks like, which is a fantastic note to end Digital Day at MediWales Connects. I would also like to point out that if you haven't had enough of online conferences, the next Digital Health Ecosystem Wales event is on April the 14th at 10 AM, and we're looking at the digital strategies of Cardiff and Vale University Health Board, the Welsh Ambulance Service Trust, and the Digital Services for Patient and the Public programme, which you've heard referenced several times today. So we're going to put details on the event in the chat. So if you would like to attend, just sign up there, and we've got a strong list of speakers, and I think it's going to be a really fascinating event. So thank you all for attending this morning. I know it feels like it's been about 3 hours and 3 minutes all in the same period of time. But I hope you found it interesting and informative, and that you've learned a lot and had a chance to really get some insight from industry, from government, and from NWIS, or Digital Health and Care Wales, on what's happening and what the future looks like. And so it's my great honour to hand over to Gwyn to wrap up for the whole of 4 days of collaboration, sharing and insight. Over to you, Gwyn.
Helen, thank you so much, and thank you for putting in such a professional shift at the end there to do the final day as guest chair. You really did bring the event alive for the final day, and I think a lot of people have been commenting in the chat that this has been a really valuable session and a great blend of those companies, the industry participants, and the programs and government that, from a health and social care point of view. So great mix and well presented. Thank you very much. I think Chris really summed it up there at the end. I couldn't have said that better myself. I mean, as I said when we started this morning, collaboration is the theme of MediWales Connects, and Chris really did underline the importance of collaboration. And he also mentioned something that I love to mention when I'm talking to partners from England, the UK, or internationally. When they say, "What are your strengths in Wales?" I don't say it's advanced therapies or digital or wound healing or diagnostics, which of course it is all of those things and more. But what I love to say is that we are uniquely well connected. We are a superb testbed for collaborative projects, collaborative R&D across health, social care, research, academia, and industry. So thank you very much, Chris, for underlining that. Paul, I think you come up with the quote of the week. I'm pretty sure Katie's probably tweeting that as we speak. So number one learning over the last year is don't have a global pandemic. Thank you for that. It's been a challenge. It's been difficult, and it's been very hard times for all of us. But everybody has put such an effort into to responding to the pandemic, and I think as a catalyst for change, as a catalyst for improvement, it's been unique. But we do recognise that it has been a significant challenge for many people in their own lives. So Connects, it's been 10 sessions, 20 hours over 4 days, 60 speakers and 300 delegates. So I think that's a success, and those delegates have come from academia, business, clinical, and on this occasion, with the Connects conference, we put the spotlight on the NHS and social care in Wales, and we've learned so much. We've learned so much about how the NHS has responded, reacting, improving, and developing and collaborating both across the NHS. We've had all of the health boards and all of the trusts have been involved in the Connects conference, and so that in itself is a feat of collaboration and indicative of how we do work well together in Wales. I think if I was going to be giving awards, by the way, I would the best background award, I think would needs to either go to Helen for her spectacular room in the background there, or Chris Hopkins from Howe, who had probably the best virtual background. I think the digital companies have the best t-shirt award. I noticed branded t-shirts are very much in the digital sector, so well done for you guys. And the best child intervention, as everybody knows, with Zoom meetings and virtual conferences, you can't have an event without children crashing into the room. And I think that's going to have to be shared between Tom James at an Iron Bevan and William Beharel at Cardiff and Vale, and the event was all the better for those interruptions and interventions. So that's my light-hearted reflection and my serious reflection on the week's events, and I really do appreciate everybody's efforts that have gone into their presentations, the participants, people contributing in the chat, but just a few thank yous that my life wouldn't be worth living if I didn't make them, but I'm delighted to make them anyway. The event, in terms of building it up over the last few months, really does fall to Izzy in terms of recruitment of delegates, looking after speakers, looking after everybody, making sure that the promotions go out and everybody is communicated with. So that's we call her Izzy, Isabel Ford, you might know her as. But Izzy, thank you so much for making this week happen. Debbie, Debbie Laubach is my business partner, and really falls to Debbie to conceive of the capturing the zeitgeist of the sector and of the moment, to make sure that that the topics and the speakers really are current, and they do hit that spot in terms of what people want to participate in and what they want to talk about. Debbie has a unique knack of doing that, and she's really been putting the effort in, and her vast networks across health and social care in Wales have also been drawn upon in order to deliver that. Katie and Sam, thank you so much. That's technical and social media support in the background, vitally important, and all part of the team. And then Lee, Sophie, and India have been our creative team. Again, you don't get to meet them, but some of the pretty pictures and the literature and our digital program and our website all come from our in-house team. So thank you very much to them. Thank you to the innovation leads across the NHS who've all contributed throughout the week, and thank you to Andrew Goodall, obviously, for kicking things off, and thank you to Ifan for kicking off today's meeting. So we've had some leadership approval, and as I think some of the studies have noted throughout the week, and the assessments, that a bit of top-down approval for people to collaborate, to kick off projects, to innovate is absolutely essential. So we've had that, and just thank you to everybody. Thank you to everyone who's been involved. Thank you to Alan from Ataxia and me, who always takes a good lead on our partners' social media. So Alan, it wouldn't be the same without you, and you're always at our events, and you've come up trumps in a digital event as well. So thank you very much, Alan. And I think that's where I get to close. So it's unusual, it's odd, everybody sitting at home but then participating in such a large event, but we've achieved it, we've done it. As David said earlier today, people can't remember what it was like before this format in so many ways, whether that's delivering healthcare, delivering events, partnering, to developing products. So I think this is something that we will be taking the best from and moving forward. And even when we are all able to meet face to face, which I dearly hope we are next year, I think we'll still be using the digital platform to make sure that everybody is included, that we can reach a wider audience, and that we can reach the whole of the nation in discussing and learning from each other's activities and collaborations. So on that note, thank you so much, and we will see you at the next event, if not before. Digital Health Ecosystem Wales, April the 14th. I'll definitely be signing up for that. So thank you so much to everybody who's stuck with us right to the end. Thank you.